Good morning and welcome to the ABC's 2024 coverage of the Anzac Day March here live from the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne. It is my great pleasure to join you for the first time to present this incredibly important day. We're expecting record crowds here in Melbourne, in Victoria and across the country to help mark this special day and honour our diggers both past and present. This is an incredibly important day for me personally. I get to wear my medals. I'm a return serviceman, and I take the opportunity to remember the mates that I've lost, the thousands that I'll never get to meet, and to really honour the families that support our service people and help protect the things that Australia holds dear. It all started this morning in services around the country in the pre-dawn light as people gathered with their friends, their families and their mates for the traditional dawn service.
We come here to know the sacrifice, the courage over fear, the loss, the sadness, the brutality, the service, the mateship and the loyalty. And today, 109 years after Pompey Elliott landed into the horror of Gallipoli, we're here again, waiting for dawn.
Stand to!
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Let us remember this day also marks 110 years since the first Australian casualties of World War I, 80 years since Australian forces won the battle for New Guinea, and 10 years since combat operations in Afghanistan ceased. Join with me in the hope that our commitment to peace will keep us from crossing that bridge to war once more and save us for peace and the keeping of the peace, lest we forget.
Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
The poppies were the first flowers to grow in the spring of Flanders, and across the battled, mangled landscape of the Western Front during the First World War, and the sweet and delicate red bloom became a sign of life, a sign of remembrance, sacrifice, giving, and a sign of love, and a symbol that whatever horror had gone before, that there would be a tomorrow, and there would still be a future. I invite the Shrine Guard to take post. The Governor will now depart the sanctuary. Shrine Guard, dismount. On behalf of RSL Victoria, thank you for joining us here at the Shrine as we make our quiet promises to always remember those who served and those who loved them and miss them still. Good morning, and lest we forget.
Beautiful pictures and a fitting start to a significant day. Now, the march is about to commence, but before it does, here's Cyan Valance, who's going to be out and about on the street talking to diggers, family and friends.
Thanks, Nate. It's an honour to be here at the Shrine, where earlier this morning 40,000 people gathered to pay their respects at the dawn service. And later, quite soon, 10,000 people are expected to take part in the march through the streets of Melbourne, and we're going to be lucky enough to meet some of them, former and serving members of the Defence Forces, dignitaries and friends and family. Now, we'll be bringing you all the colour, the emotion and the memories from people who've served. At this point, I'd usually give you the weather, but I'm going to leave that up to the professional. It's over to you, Nate.
Thanks, Cyan. Yeah, let me pop my other hat on, my normal weather presenter hat. Of course, usually on breakfast and finished work by this time of the morning. It's currently 13.4 degrees in Melbourne. Feels like 10.8, just a touch warmer than it felt at the dawn service this morning. Luckily, the showers are holding off for now. You can see the skies just a little bit grey. There is a risk of a couple of drops, but that's easing off as we go through the morning and into this afternoon. So I reckon we might just get away with it. Cyan, we'll look forward to crossing back to you through the morning. And as you can see, the parade is now underway, stepping off from Flinders Street Station. Participants then make their way along St Kilda Road here in Melbourne and then to Anzac Avenue in front of the Shrine and finally through to the forecourt of this impressive and significant building. To help guide us through the morning, joining me in the hosting position are some expert commentators representing the Army, Lieutenant Colonel James Ealing. A very good morning to you, James.
Good morning, Nate. It's great to be here on this glorious morning.
And isn't it just a glorious morning? We will also be hearing the voice of Commander Terry Making, representing my former service, the Navy. Good morning to you, Terry.
Good morning, Nate. Hopefully we can do the right thing by all the troops.
That's it. This is not just a Navy Day, even though there are two of us in the box today. And finally, the Air Force Squadron Leader, Steve Campbell-Wright, is joining us. Good morning to you, Steve.
Hi, Nate, and absolute pleasure to be here. And here we are at the shrine with the glorious sun coming out in front of us. It's going to be a great day. Blue skies overhead.
Yeah, I reckon there's just enough blue there to make a sailor a pair of pants, and that means the skies are going to clear. That's an old saying. Let's actually stick with some history and get a wealth of historical information from the RSL. Welcome to Aileen Phillips.
Very good morning, Nate.
Good morning to you.
Good to be here.
Have you heard that before?
I haven't. There's something new every day that I learn in this job.
That's it. There is so much history, right?
There is. There's a lot going on.
And actually, there's history behind this building that we're sitting in front of.
It sure is. The shrine was opened actually in 1934, and the Duke of Gloucester performed the dedication in the presence of over 300,000 people that we know of. There may have been more lining the streets, so it was quite a remarkable occasion at the time.
Yeah, we're expecting to see thousands of people here today, both along the path of the parade and then here at the shrine too. Tens of thousands gathered this morning at the Shrine of Remembrance for the dawn service. I think the last estimation I heard was about 40,000 people.
I heard the same. So remarkable turnout actually, and it was just, the weather was perfect, and the dawn service, I shared it with my 12-year-old daughter this morning, which was really special. It was her first time.
Oh, lovely,
that
lovely.
Was really special.
How did she feel about it?
Actually very emotional, and she knows my connection to the RSL, and so for her that was even more personal.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of position to be in, isn't it, when with kids, because you want to impress on them the gravity of the day, and also though there is an element of celebration within the commemoration of Anzac Day.
There absolutely is. It really is just so many layers of emotions. You've got the sombre feeling together with, as you say, that commemorative spirit as well. So, and I think it's just so important to impart that on children.
Yeah. Well, Aileen, I can't wait to hear all of the historical tidbits you're going to have for us through this morning. Steve, I wonder, how many of these Anzac Day marches have you been involved with now?
Oh, good question. I probably did my first one when I was 12, and that at the time was in Sydney, and I was a musician when I was younger, so I was in a band, so that meant that I was in high demand every Anzac Day, and I don't think I have missed an Anzac Day since, well, I won't give it away, but the early 70s.
Right. Well, actually, speaking of bands, the Victoria Police Band here, coming down behind the mounted police, leading the parade today. Police have often been forgotten when it comes to thinking about serving in Australia, Terry, but they really are an important part of what we all do in service of our country.
Well, I think there are so many of the police that actually joined up for every conflict, and many of the United Nations peacekeeping missions, of course, where you had Australian Federal Police, Victoria Police engaged in that, and we'll see many of those out here today.
Yeah, we're talking this year, there's a real focus on peacekeepers. Australia's got a long history of being involved in peacekeeping since the 40s, I believe. Was it 1947?
That's correct. It was just shortly after World War II, to my knowledge, and it's still going today. You know, we forget that these people are placed all over the world, often overlooked, and confronted at times in very perilous circumstances too.
Yeah, and because peacekeeping forces are made up of military, of police people, but also people not in uniform, civilians as well. And we're marking those people today as well, those who serve but not in uniform.
Absolutely. We can't not recognise them today.
And we shouldn't forget that the first participants in UN peacekeeping were actually Australia in Indonesia in 1947.
Yeah, a couple of Australians, I think, went over there. You can see the official party coming in behind the police band, including the Governor and the Premier of Victoria. They're just marching quietly behind and somberly.
And you might have to stand to attention there, Nate, because you've got the Senior Naval Officer, Greg York, AM, who's been given another year's extension as the Senior Naval Officer.
Yeah, wow. Wow. And coming in behind, you can see the New Zealand Return Services flag there, the banner with, of course, our friends from across the pond. marching quietly and somberly down, coming in towards the front of the parade today, and some scouts there as well, helping them along.
We often don't think about the Scouts, Nate, and they're a group that has had a long-standing tradition of assisting with Anzac Day events on a local through to a national level, and they've been, what I understand, assisting with Anzac Day in Melbourne CBD since 1916.
Oh, wow, 1916.
Way back.
That's
Yep.
that's incredible. I was a scout back in the day. I was a Sea Scout.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah, before I got into being a naval, officer eventually. But yeah, Scouts, what a wonderful thing especially for kids to get involved in. And if you get to be a Sea Scout.
1916 was when the Return and Services League was formed, actually, in Melbourne.
Right, 1916.
I wasn't there, by the way.
You weren't? Look, yeah, I'll forgive you that one. I'll forgive you that one, for sure. Brilliant.
Yes, I hope it's a proud day for the Scouts taking part. The Scouts have a military origin, of course, with Lord Baden-Powell setting up his first camp for boys on Brownsea Island in England, and for them to gain some skills that were outside of those that they might have in their normal domestic lives, the skills of fieldcraft, the fields of observation, and for looking out for themselves on their own wits. And several members of the Scouts have gone through to have long and distinguished careers in all sorts of fields within Australia, but particularly in the military.
The police band now just coming to the forecourt at the Shrine of Remembrance, and the official party are making their approach to the steps of the shrine, led there by the flags, of course the Australian flag, but also the white ensign there, which us Navy folk are quite attached to.
The most important one of the three, of course.
Yeah.
Primacy doesn't equal supremacy. And you'll see there the police band coming through, and they are wearing the red McPherson tartan, and they have worn that tartan for several years, and it reflects the benefactor who helped establish the band in 1936, a Mr. W.E. McPherson. He is honoured through them wearing that red McPherson tartan.
And speaking of the Navy, here's some of my mates.
There we go. And the this is the remaining part of the Royal Australian Navy Band. They're in Melbourne. The rest are in Gallipoli at the moment. And Daniel McIvan is the band leader just there, as we can see. A great band, and they do a considerable amount of work around the state, looking after or supporting community events, and particularly maritime ceremonial activities here at the Shrine and elsewhere.
I was never a member of the Navy band, but I was a Navy cadet band member, believe it or not. I've had a side-slung snare drum before, and was briefly a band leader there, believe it or not, as a little kid running around being a doofus. But the Navy band, in fact all of our military bands, they play a really important role, don't they? Because they're not just there to play some music, are they?
Absolutely. My understanding in all the interviews I've done over the years with veterans is the importance that bands bring to morale, and also to community engagement. They tour around and connect with locals and develop a rapport that is so important to the work that the military forces bring in their engagements.
Yeah, and of course getting them overseas to see our troops, it's a reminder and a taste of home coming to visit. Now, leading our serving forces, the Navy. Why is the Navy in front?
Well, Stephen might not agree. They are the senior service, and look at these young folk, aren't they? Very smart.
Incredible.
And from Cerberus, most of them undergoing training, so that they'll be at sea looking after our borders and further afield. Great bunch of folk being led by Captain Ben Favell. He's the new commanding officer at Cerberus.
HMAS Cerberus, of course, down on the peninsula. It's a place where all of our Navy sailors go for their initial training and then stay on for category training beyond that. You know, that's something I think us Victorians maybe sometimes overlook, but something we should hold proud. You know, all of our Navy people, they're trained right here on Victorian soil.
Yep. And at the end of week 3, all the recruits come to the Shrine of Remembrance and go through a wreath-laying service and through the Galleries of Remembrance, and hopefully all Victorians have done that, been here to experience what the Shrine's all about, this awesome monument.
Yeah, wonderful. Actually, talking about being out and about, Sian is on the street and has somebody she's found to have a chat to.
I'm here to pay my respects to all of the gentlemen and their families, you know, who fought in the wars and still dedicate their time today to just serving the country. I'm not from Australia, I'm South African, but I've got relatives who fought in the war as well, and so it's just nice to, you know, respect them.
And what does Anzac Day mean to you?
Well, I know that for myself, having like moved around and seeing all these different countries and being really close to my family as well, the fact that, you know, whether or not they chose to do it, it was something that they had to sacrifice as well, you know. And so being an immigrant, I really respect being able to come into a country that's safe and that people fought for.
You're doing very well.
We saw the Navy leading on, and we now have the Army following behind. And the question was asked, well, why is the Navy the senior service? And that's in fact a tradition that goes back well before the founding of what we now call Australia. And it dates from the British forces, where the Royal Navy was in fact formed before the British Army.
Yeah.
The British Army was raised as required, and colonels raised their regiments and supplied them, if you like, to the sovereign, whereas the Royal Navy was a standing navy. So they are in fact older than the British Army. So it really goes back to our inherited traditions.
Mm-hmm. And us Navy people will never let you forget it.
That is so true.
James, to seeing the troops here bring some warmth to you.
Absolutely. So this is the 4th Brigade, Victoria's Brigade, and Tasmania. So the main Army unit within Victoria, and it's the brigade that I serve with. So the march led today by our Brigadier Michelle Campbell, and with her is the Brigade RSM, Warrant Officer Class 1 Tony Lynch. The brigade headquarters led by Colonel Paul MacArthur and Colonel Dan Strack, and they're looking very fine indeed.
And there we have the pipe band of the Royal Victorian Regiment, judging by their cap badges and collar badges. And you'll note the drum major's, in fact it's called a baldric, but his sash, as it's commonly known, you'll see already has changed to the King Charles III cipher. So very much up with the times there.
A lot of people who haven't spent time in the military will wonder, how do you decipher the uniforms? Well, what do you look at here when you're looking at people from your respective services? I mean, you know, you think about rank, number one, but we wear a lot of things that give you a hint as to who somebody is and what they do.
They're something like a code, really, aren't they? And a lot of it's in the colours, a lot of it's in the symbolism. And, for example, when you see somebody's medals on their chest, it was put to me a little while ago that it's in fact your resume on your chest.
Yeah.
So you can see, well, I mean, he's been to Timor, he's probably done border operations as well, that chap there. The one in front has probably been to Bougainville, let's say, and you can tell how many years of service they've done. So all of those ribbons really have a colour coding that when your eye is in, you can interpret very, very quickly.
And the other thing that will give it away is the unit hat badge. So on everyone's hat, there'll be a little badge there. That'll tell them what brigade and they belong to, or what unit.
And this is where the Navy's much simpler.
Yeah, we just write the words straight on our sailors' hats. Tell you exactly which unit they're from in plain English, which is wonderful. And actually, we've all got our medals on here today. The three of us, the four of us, I mean, that have served in the military. Do you get to wear your medals very often, gentlemen?
Well, Steve and I are governors of the Shrine, so we host every service that occurs at the Shrine. Steve doing Air Force, that's Dr. Steve, of course, squadron leader, and I host all the Navy with others, so it's pretty important. But just with the medals, there's one medal that particularly counts, the red and white one.
Yeah.
And that's to say that every one of those people wearing a red and white medal, they said they would take up a weapon and use it to keep Australia safe.
Yeah. Even those who don't end up during their careers going and doing operations overseas, active or otherwise, every single serving person will end up with that red and white service medal,
yep.
Which is a relatively new medal actually, and was created to mark those people, to commemorate those people who didn't serve for particularly long.
Here we have the troops of the 4 CISB, the Combat Service Support Battalion, led by the commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Pete Crosby, and the RSM, Warrant Officer Class 1, Troy Moore. The Combat Service Support Battalion, a very important role. They provide the transport, the food, all of the logistics for the brigade to be able to do its job.
They're the people that you want to keep happy. That's how you get fresh milk. Yeah,
100%,
for your coffees in the morning.
Very important people.
Never, ever, ever upset a chef. Or somebody who delivers you your food in your mail. Yeah, no, the support services, they're often forgotten because they're generally relatively in the background, but can't operate without them.
Absolutely right, and we operate in a joint environment, and Navy, Army and Air Force always operate together now, and you'll find that those people from those CISBs and various communications units and so on form forward task units and support task units in forward areas, and you'll find people there from all 3 services, and each of them brings their own skills to that combat support role.
The big thing with the brigade, the majority of those people will all be reservists, so they'll have a civilian job, and so the support they get from their families, from their employers, and of course the defence civilians that we've got working within the brigade as well. So it's one big team to sort of be able to get the people out, to be able to support the operations that we've been on. So recently, bushfire assist, COVID assist, a lot of members deployed on that during our COVID pandemic. And it's fantastic to see them all out there today.
It is great that our people stand up so readily when Australia needs us, whether or not it's overseas or indeed here at home. You know, the 2019-2020 bushfire season was just so horrific, and so many people got up and put their hands up to assist. But also, yeah, remembering that they do have jobs and lives that they have to drop really quickly and you know, move away to come help our nation in our times of need. Cyan is hunting the streets for us this morning, and she's found someone else to have a chat with.
I had a lot of family in World War I, World War II. I served, I never had to go overseas, so I was the lucky one.
So when you are here today, who are you thinking about?
Mainly my relatives, my aunt mainly. She was a long-serving soldier in World War II, served in the islands, and she was a remarkable woman.
And you don't often hear about the women in World War II. She sounds like a force of nature.
She was great, and she could make anything out of material. We've got big dolls, that sort of thing. She was marvellous. And she served in New Guinea and Mauritania, and invalided home with a skin disease. So she, luckily the boat came home. Some of the boats didn't, with sick on them. So yeah, it means a lot to me.
So many people with so many stories of the people that they're remembering today. It can be a really difficult day for people, but also one with some light, hopefully, because you get to see your mates and remember those people in a positive way.
Yes, that's probably one of the most important aspects of today, I think. It's just seeing your mates and maybe not necessarily focusing on your mates that are not here, although they always come to mind.
They do.
But it's just enjoying the company of your shipmates and those that went through some difficult times with you.
I think that's one thing that people outside of the service don't really understand, is that within Army, from the first day you are taught to look after your mates, and it makes a really big difference. And that's why today is really a lot about catching up with mates, checking in with people who you may not have seen. Because the relationships that you form, particularly when there's a little bit of adversity, people a little bit out of their comfort zone, that's when you learn to rely on your mates. And I think it's that great bond that you don't get anywhere else in civilian community.
Yeah, well, as a Navy person, I can tell you now, being on the outside, it's not often you have to go to work and sleep at the same place, just right next to your bed and your bathroom. Is that not in real life? So yeah, you kind of have to get along with everyone and form some really tight bonds.
And I think that image there tells the story, Nate. That's 2 sailors, 2 soldiers and 2 aviators carrying a dead comrade on top of the cenotaph. And that's it's an image that really just brings it home to most people that look up and understand what it is. And we can see that from where we are right now.
Yes, and that's on top of the World War II column here on the forecourt of Melbourne Shrine of Remembrance. The shrine itself, built from the 1920s and opened in 1934, as Aileen said, prior to the Second World War. And with the horrors of the Second World War, there was a feeling that there needed to be something additional that in fact marked the sacrifice of the Second World War. And that column stands before us.
Imposing, impressive, and very, very fitting, in just the right place, in just right beside the eternal flame here on the forecourt. Well, I have a question for you, gentlemen. When we have all 3 services together, Navy, Army and Air Force, we call them purple sometimes. Why is that?
The notion is that if you were to mix all 3 colours together, you would end up with purple. I mean, chemically, you'd probably end up with brown, but that's not very attractive. So when you add the red and the blue and you throw in a dash of green, it makes purple. Right. So that's where that comes from.
Look, I will go home and do the experiment afterwards. But that's why I choose to wear purple myself now for Anzac Day. Because, although Navy is my number 1, that's where I'm from. When I served overseas, I did that with with a Navy team from Australia, but as part of a larger task force that was purple. So I like to commemorate Anzac Day thinking more tri-service than just Navy.
Don't go too far, mate.
No, I won't. Don't you worry, sir. Never too far away from some shipside grey, that's for sure. Melbourne High School band here.
Yes, another great band.
Yes, and they are very much honouring their traditions. The Australian Army used to wear a pith helmet, and in fact the Navy band used to as well, because they took their traditions from the Royal Marines, and they wore a white pith helmet with a ball on top, whereas the infantry-based ones wear a pith helmet with a spike on top, and that high-collared white colonial-style uniform, and the very, very dark blue, in fact not black, trousers with the red stripe down the side. You'll see the bass drummer there wearing a leopard skin as well, and that tradition goes a long way back. Here we have the Air Force now joining, and there is the commander there, that is Air Commodore David Strong, and you'll see behind him the men and women of RAF Williams, primarily from the Laverton and Point Cook bases. Many of those will be with number 21 Squadron, which has a long and proud history that goes back to just before the start of the Second World War.
Just marking time as they wait for the parade route to clear in front of them.
And marking time is surprisingly difficult because you don't take the full stride, of course, you're just on the spot and you're taking a shorter one, which means it's very, very easy to speed up. So you'll find that when troops mark time, they often get out of step. And to see them there marking time and keeping perfect step, I say that is a very well trained, very well drilled and disciplined group.
They're doing very well. Normally you see at least one arm swinging out of time, but because it's not all that often, at least not in the Navy, that we actually had the opportunity to march. It was, you know, we were trained, very well trained, but then you don't really form squads and march around ships very often.
It's very sad, isn't it?
It is, it is.
And that leads to the Navy tradition of when they turn, rather than turning on a pivot and stamping their foot in, they turn and then slide their foot, because if you were to stamp your foot on the deck the whole time, the tar and caulking and nails would come loose and your ship would sink. So,
plus, you know, if the ship's rolling as well, it's best to keep both feet on the deck.
Yes, for sure. You might have gathered from that that Steve's the ex-director of music from the Royal Australian Air Force.
Oh. Wow, I did not know that at all. Please, go on.
Oh, if you insist. That is a role that I held for, I think, 16 years, which is possibly a command record. And it's something that I did in a past life, but I still remember everything that I used to do back then, and I was honoured to have served in several places with the Air Force Band, including Timor and Solomon Islands and Iraq and Afghanistan, but I also ended up serving in Iraq and Afghanistan separately later in my career with the Air Task Force. And there we go, he's smiling at us, one of the UN returned veterans here. And here we have the peacekeepers and peacemakers who are marching here up the steps of the Shrine of Remembrance.
So let's talk more about peacekeepers. I mean, we saw the East Timor and Namibia. What is a peacekeeper?
Well, I think from my perspective, Nate, every person in the Navy is a peacekeeper, and sadly there are occasions when you become a peacemaker. And I think the key today was to try and collect those that have got the UN medal to identify that they are specifically part of a peacekeeping mission.
It's been very interesting, actually, with the RSL Victoria shining the light now on the peacekeepers and peacemakers and peace builders. The idea, when I've interviewed veterans who have been in those roles, that they go in, and the idea is to, I think, also develop a rapport with locals. I mean, simple things like carrying your weapons behind you, not in front of you, so that you don't come across as though that you're, you know,
an aggressor.
An aggressor, absolutely.
And the people who are involved in those missions are in as much danger quite often as others. And I think it was when I was in the Solomons, there was a memorial there to the one Australian who had died in that mission. And he, in fact, was a member of the Federal Police and was picked off by a sniper while riding on the back of a ute. And they are in equal danger with the ADF personnel there, warlike or non-warlike.
We do ask so much of our service people, and it is so sad, especially when you're there, you know, when you're somewhere hoping to hold and keep peace, to lose your life in that situation is incredibly sad. Cyan is still out and about for us. She's managed to track down a couple of kids and dads.
Why are you here today?
Because I want to watch the Anzac Day.
Yeah. And what's your connection to Anzac Day?
My husband, his father, he served in the military and he's currently still serving, and we're here to watch him march and to pay our respects to everyone that's served in the past and currently, to thank them for what they've done for us, for the beautiful country that we have, and appreciate that they fought for our rights that we have now.
Well said.
Lovely. Coming down to see your dad for Anzac Day, watching him march up the street.
Yeah. Proud day for the family.
And here we have a pipe band coming through, and pipe bands march at a slower pace than military bands. They usually march at about 104 paces per minute, whereas military bands usually march at 120. And I know when I was leading bands up here, we made a conscious decision to march at 108 paces per minute to allow the veterans a bit of breath and allow them to get into a good stride as they come past the saluting dais and the eternal flame.
108. How do you keep that time in your head? I mean, you know, 120 feels like it's sort of natural. 108, it's so specific.
It is, and you really get a feel for it. You get yourself into that groove, and every band relies on its bass drummer. There's one bass drummer in every band, with a few exceptions, and that person is the timekeeper, and you have to brief them very, very well at the start, and they are almost human metronomes.
A human metronome. I think it could be called worse things. That's that's quite lovely. Now, I want to ask you about wearing medals, because you can see lots of people here with their medals on their left side, but then look at that little fella there. It's big bar, long bar of medals. Certainly not his, I would suggest. He's wearing them on the right.
Yeah. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, that if you wear them on the right, you're wearing them on behalf of someone else that has served. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct.
There
and
we
you
go.
wear them on the left because that's over your heart. So that's the place dearest to you. And they are also ranked in order from the way you display it, from your right to your left. So your most senior medal is closer to your right hand and your least one on the left. Not that there's a least by any means,
No.
but honours and decorations, so bravery medals and Order of Australia and Order of the British Empire and so on, you'll see on the right hand of the wearer, so closer to the centre, and then it goes down through campaign medals, and then it goes to service medals, and then beyond that any foreign medals. So you'll see Vietnam veterans on the very left hand side, closer to their left sleeve, you'll see a green medal there. That's a foreign medal that was awarded to them by the government of South Vietnam. You can see a couple there on the screen now, and that was a very easy way to pick a Vietnam veteran, I would suggest.
And with descendants that are wearing medals, there should ideally only be the originals being worn by a member of the family.
Oh, actually, on that, I've got a little thing I can tell everybody. I wouldn't normally show my hand like this. I'm not wearing my real medals. Are you, gentlemen?
No.
No. Almost none of us do. But,
I am.
Oh, you are?
Oh, I've got my real medals, yeah.
My real medals are tucked away very securely somewhere. I wear replicas just because I can't be trusted.
Well, these medals I'm wearing were actually put together by Stephen here.
Really? Stephen,
Yes.
Is there nothing you don't turn your hand to?
If I find something, I'll let you know, Nate, all right?
But that's great. I could actually do with a new set. Mine are starting to get a bit grubby, which is the other reason we wear replicas. Because your real medals, there's only one made, right? You can't get them again.
That's right.
Because they're engraved with your name. So James, how come you're so brave? To wear your real ones?
I think it's I never really thought of getting a set of replicas, so that was it.
Entirely fair enough. Look, that's wear them proudly.
I probably lead a less exciting life than you do.
I don't know how exciting it is. I just, like I say, I can't be trusted. I put things down and can't find them again. Every single time I have to get my medals, there's a scramble. And I normally find them on the jacket I was wearing last, still hanging there.
Here we have the Australian Army Training Team Vietnam. Played a critical role in Vietnam, sent over very early in the war, in 1962 I think it was, to basically augment the training of Vietnamese troops within the South Vietnamese Army, and did a very good job working with Montagnard tribesmen in programs to support them and their ability to resist the communist insurgents. They were deployed in most of the provinces throughout South Vietnam, from the DMZ through the Central Highlands to the Mekong Delta. And in total, 985 Australians served with the team. 33 were killed in action and 122 were wounded in action.
Yes, courageous unit.
Very courageous. The unit was awarded the US Army Meritorious Unit Commendation and the South Vietnamese Cross for gallantry with a palm.
Yes, they were certainly right at the forefront of the danger, and I in fact served with a member of the AATV when I was very young, and he was the RSM of the Army Regiment that I was in long before I joined the Air Force, and I will never forget him. His name was Pincott, and he had a 1,000-mile stare. If you spoke to him, he looked through you and beyond you. He didn't look at you, and I'm convinced that that was as a result of his service with AATV.
They certainly saw some very tough times. We've just had the 1st Armoured Regiment Association come through. 1st Armoured Car Squadron converted on the 7th of July 1949 to be renamed the 1st Armoured Regiment. And they've had manned battle tanks, Churchill, Centurion, Leopard, and now the M1A1 Abrams.
These groups coming down the road towards the Shrine of Remembrance. I think a lot of these groups obviously are getting smaller and smaller every year. It just highlights the significance of marking this day and giving our thanks and really turning out for these veterans who have done so much for Australia.
That's so true, and what we're also finding is that their services are establishing units that they need to establish for modern operational reasons, and often they are going back and naming them after a unit that had a proud history in the past. So I'm thinking of something like 39 Battalion, who did wonderful work during the Second World War and then were disbanded afterwards, but then were re-raised in Randwick about, 15 years ago, I think, as a training battalion for people going overseas. So they are, if you like, reinvigorating that regiment, and the Air Force does the same with its squadrons. If we need to raise a new squadron, say for the new Triton that's coming in, we have chosen to name it 9 Squadron. 9 Squadron's been defunct for several years, so that history can now pass on through the new squadron. Terry, does the Navy do that with ships?
I don't know. I was just going to point out there was Major General David McLaughlin there, who, as the officer in the Order of Australia, in the military and in the General Division, and does a lot of work with the state government about veterans being employed by the state.
We also just saw there the Royal Australian Engineers as well. They're my kind of people. Engineers, bit of a science man, me. But so good to see them.
Be careful, Nate, I was one.
Oh no,
so to speak.
Luckily, I managed to avoid getting an engineering degree. I'm a physicist, but engineers, next best thing.
Yes,
I reckon.
well done.
So good to see the kids getting involved as well here with that band just a moment ago walking there, and we're expecting to see just thousands of people right along this parade route, but then gathering here at the Shrine of Remembrance. Once everybody gets here, what are the next stages of the morning?
Well, they've got the wreath laying immediately after the march, and then there's a short service held here. Of course, a lot of the different units, after they've finished their particular part of the march, they'll go to a dedicated tree within the reserve, where there's probably about 150, and they'll have a quiet moment and reflect on their mates that are not here. And then they might journey down to Young and Jackson's.
Yes, well, that was always our gathering spot, for sure. When I was here in Victoria at one of the marches, Young Jackson's has a long, proud naval history and connection.
I've just seen.
That's where the Naval Association essentially kicked off from back in 1921.
I think that there's a lot of people who've had a beer or two at I&J's. So just going through there was the National Servicemen Association. And of course, they were the ones who were conscripted from 1965 through to 1972. The ones whose birthday came up in the ballot and did sterling service during the Vietnam War.
And the first group of Nashos were, of course, for Korea, where some of them were just recruited for 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, very quick recruiting for the Korean deployment.
Yes.
And we did see OTU coming through, Officer Training Unit, and their symbol there with the crossed swords and the pip on it, the 1 lieutenant's pip. And when they graduated from there, they came out as a 2nd lieutenant, and they were then able to lead those national servicemen after their extensive training. I did see marching amongst them the Life Governor of the Shrine, Peter Whitelaw.
Yes.
Yeah, so OTU Skyville's got a very long and proud history, a 26-week course, trained specifically to be able to command a platoon in the jungle, which was what they were preparing for. And many did excellent service in Vietnam. Not all of them deployed to Vietnam, but a lot of them did. And some of them saw significant combat. So probably one of the most famous Nashos would be Dave Sabin, who was in Delta Company 6 RAR at the Battle of Long Tan.
And quite a few of them stayed on, of course, and did 20 years or more.
Definitely,
Adrian Lombardo, another Life Governor of the Shrine, was one of those. He finished up as a half colonel.
Now here's some sappers. What's a sapper?
So they will be our engineers. They will be the ones who will clear obstacles for the force to be able to manoeuvre. They will put obstacles in the way of the enemy to shape them, to stop the enemy moving freely.
And why sapper? Do we know?
Well, that is a good question.
Everybody looks at me. I know nearly all of the Navy traditions and certainly all the Air Force ones.
Navy, I'm easy.
Actually, the Army ones, I don't know.
I think, so a sap is what was used to be dug under a castle wall, I believe. And that's why they're called sappers, I think. Happy to be corrected, but I think that's why it is.
Look, nobody Google it. We'll say that's the reason. I'm happy with that.
They just showed the Senior Vice President of the Naval of the RSL there, Des Callanan, marching with his signals group.
161 Independent Recce Squadron. In June 1965, the 161 reconnaissance flight was raised for deployment to the Vietnam War. And in September that year, the flight deployed to South Vietnam with 2 Cessna 180s and 2 Sioux light observation helicopters. And those helicopters would have operated out of Kangaroo Pad at Nui Dat.
We do have lots of very weird language in the military, don't we? Lots of it's mostly tradition, right? That keeps us using old names, and sometimes you lose where that's come from in the past.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, and of course some of those are enduring and go back a long time. Some of them are relatively recent, and the Signals Corps in the Army and the telecommunications personnel in Navy and Air Force, when they get together as a group, they're collectively known as the Geeks.
Oh, get in. Oh, I like that. I like that quite a lot.
They're very important people. As soon as you get to a base, you need to find them because they're the ones who set up your internet account.
Yep, that's it. Brilliant. Number one necessary thing these days. Aileen, have you had to learn military speak in order to do your job? How hard is it?
Nate, I am true civilian. I have not had any personal experience of service, but let me tell you, starting at the RSL, I've had to learn a whole nother language.
Yeah.
Everything is shortened, abbreviated. There are letter references to everything, so it's really been a work in progress, and I'm most certainly far from an expert still, 6 years in.
We love a 3-letter acronym and all sorts of weird weird words. I mean, especially the Navy. I mean, you know, if I needed to pop to the heads before I go for scran, most people have no idea what I'm talking about. And even years after getting out of uniform, it still comes out of my mouth so naturally.
It really does. I have to say, even speaking to ex-service Army men and women, Navy and Air Force men and women, who are now working in the civilian world, they themselves have to somehow learn to readjust and readapt into everyday speak.
Yes, that three-letter acronym thing, commonly known as a TLA, of course, is widely used in defence. And I remember doing an officer training course some years ago. We had a lot of civilians who were coming into uniform, and one of them said to me after about 2 weeks, I finally worked it out, she said, once I can speak entire sentences in three-letter acronyms and understand the same, then I'll know I'm a member of the military.
Yeah, that's it. That's when you know you've gotten there. Women veterans here. The service of women serving in the Australian military, there are still people who remember times before that was even possible.
And, you know, we think back to times gone by where women were such an important role also on the home front. You know, their contribution to make things tick over while men went to war. So it was service in a different way. And now we just, you know, really want to recognise the role that women played. And often we spoke earlier about wearing your medals on the correct side if you've served. And that really has been a thing for women. They've often been mistaken for wearing medals that, you know, they have earned, they are theirs, and people say, oh, who are you wearing them for? Yeah.
Look, I've had that myself from time to time in the past, and in fact one Anzac Day a nice gentleman, I'll say that, came and told me to get my medals on the other side. I was like, I'm sorry sir, but yeah, they're mine. I couldn't imagine serving without women in the Navy, but it's not all that long that women weren't allowed to go to sea.
Definitely, women are able to participate in all of the roles in Army now, which is fantastic.
And the Air Force has had women serving since the Second World War with the Women's Australian Auxiliary Air Force, and they served several roles. And we also had the nursing service during the Second World War, and some of the women in Australia were serving up on the north coast in radar stations in appalling conditions. So they were doing it very much as tough as men, and were performing a magnificent role.
They're the RANs, women of the Royal Australian Navy. Quite oddly, during my naval service, RAN was seen, first of all, as a bit of a derogatory term, and then later was taken back by the women of the Royal Australian Navy, the Women's Royal Australian Navy. They were originally a separate force and then were combined once women were allowed to serve.
Yes, I think in '84 they went from blue badges to gold. So they went into that one service. This is the warfare officers that we just saw go by, and they were being led by Rear Admiral John Lord, ex-fleet commander of the Royal Australian Navy. And prior to that we had Graham Thomas, he's the state president of the Naval Association of Victoria. But the RANs, they pioneered, of course, they started in the Second World War, where 12 of them were communicators, and they finally realised they needed to be in uniform because they were doing all this confidential work, secret work. And from that stemmed the RANs themselves. And they're currently led by Wendy Sedgwick. She's the president. That's Marty Grogan there, and he's the senior Navy Marshal, and that's Chris Thomas. Chris is the president of the Sydney Association and has just finished his time as the president of the Phillip Island RSL sub-branch. So they're two very, very committed people. That's the HMAS Sydney Association chaplain.
We were talking about names earlier. Sydney is one of those names that has been taken by several ships over the years.
Yes, 5 of those have been in existence, and I understand that it's been promised that there will always be a HMAS Sydney. And of course the more recent HMAS Sydney is the air warfare destroyer, which is a phenomenal ship, probably as good as any warship in the world. And you know, the honours awards for Sydney has covered a considerable amount.
Need a bigger banner.
They will. Well, they have 5 banners, but we've been trying to say there should be one, HMAS Sydney, and just list all the battle honours. And I think we just spotted the Submariners there with Boots Hathaway. That's the president right there. Boots Hathaway, ex-RN and RAN. And his secretary to his right is Ian Tanner, who's the president of the St Kilda RSL sub-branch as well. The Submariners have always worked. That's a tough life in a submarine, I can tell you.
I was just on board HMAS Deshano just over a month ago with a camera crew.
Wonderful.
It was incredible. Actually, the first vessel I ever served in was a submarine. When I was doing my officer training, it took HMAS Rankin from Perth round to Sydney. Very odd for a trainee to get on board a submarine, but I tell you what, a week and a half under the waves was just enough to tell me that I loved it and never wanted to do it again.
Great. And the Communications Association, whilst there's not a lot there, that's a strong association across the country, really, formed after the Second World War. That's Chris Fairley, Fleet Air Arm. He's currently serving, and behind him we'll have, I think, Roy Christie will be in there somewhere. He's their state president.
And HMAS Melbourne in Melbourne.
That's
How
it.
Appropriate. Another name I assume that we'll never not have one of. Fleet Air Arm. Now, we started this talking about Navy being the senior service. Not only is it the senior service, it tries to do one of everything, doesn't it? Because we've got ships, we've got aircraft, and we've got people that we can put on the land.
We have to be careful we don't let Steve in here because he'll take over this. But yes, without organic air support, although it's sad we missed the fixed-wing aircraft finished in the service, as you know, with the A4s when the aircraft carrier Melbourne ceased to be. But we had that from the Second World War right through to the end of Vietnam.
No aircraft carrier since.
Well, we've only got the large Canberra and Adelaide, which are the landing dock helicopter, where they can carry, large helicopters, and I think there's about 36 they can carry all up if things are going properly.
And it does make sense that they're operated by Navy as an organic capability of their ship, because they really only serve that ship, whereas Air Force's air power capability is theatre-wide and can be shared in several ways, tactically and strategically.
So this, I didn't quite see the banner of this particular, Hobart, of course, which is another fantastic ship. Today it's an air warfare destroyer, but Hobart goes back quite a long way with East Indies in 1940 and a few other things like that. So that was one of the marvellous warships with Coral Sea Battle, as you can see there, the Red Sea, operated across many of the oceans of the world. And of course it always enjoys a quick visit to Hobart every now and again. And
HMAS Benura.
Here we go. This is the second. There were 2 Menoras, of course. The first one we'll see later. That's Jim Sears leading the Menora 2 group. And later on we'll see the armed merchant cruisers where Menora 1 and others were there. The interesting thing about this, of course, is the banners come about because there's a champion in the location who has collected his mates, and they've formed an association or an extension from a national body, and that's where each of these banners come from. So it's not as if the Returned and Services League, the Navy, Army or Air Force have organised these banners. they come about because there's somebody who's gone to the trouble from Quick Match, for instance, and said, we need to get together and do something on Anzac Day.
Even all these years on, still that mateship holds. Even if you didn't actually serve with someone, having been in the same vessel is enough.
Yes, and I think your point earlier, Nate, about the tally band, if you've worn a tally band that's got quibbering on it, or Yarra, for instance, and
So
there's been...
that's the thing around the white cap there. You can see there TS Voyager, training ship Voyager, those are cadets, but that's the tally band, yeah.
Yes, and of course that Voyager banner was designed by survivors of the Voyager 2, which was sadly sunk in February 1964 when it collided with the Melbourne.
M87 HMAS Yarra, that is the vessel in which I got my ticket to drive ships.
Well done.
HMAS Yarra.
Bridge watchkeeping certificate, the most important certificate you can get as a seaman officer.
A Huon class mine hunter. Actually, I took HMAS Yarra over to find old World War II mines over in the Solomon Islands and New Caledonia as well, left by Americans during World War II, and defunct for the most part, but still very much out there and potentially dangerous. So yeah, there you go. Yeah. That's my direct connection.
Excellent.
I think I can wrap this up now. Okay, I'll leave you to it. No.
Well, I just showed the HMAS Australia group there, and that's Grant Knox. He looks after them. And of course, the Canberra sadly was sunk on the 9th of August 1942. Here's the scrap line flotilla.
Let's talk about them.
Well, these were the 5 destroyers that were sent off in the Second World War, the first military commitment. And the person out the front is Ron Evans, who we can't see, so he must be quite a few metres in the front there. And of course, the redhead there is Mrs. Makings. She's wearing her father's World War II medals. But the scrap iron flotilla did an enormous work. They were ferrying to the Tobruk, Rats of Tobruk. And N-class destroyers were a group of destroyers from the RN that essentially stayed mainly in the Mediterranean, did enormous work there. And the Fairmiles were just very small motor vessels, and they did a great amount of job. They were supposed to be just looking after the ports and so forth, but they've realised they were so effective that they used them in quite a few different places across the theatres of war.
Mine sweepers versus mine hunters. I was on a mine hunter. Sweepers, very different kind of vessel.
I think the difference would be about 50 years in age.
Yeah.
But a lot of the mine sweepers of those days were converted fishing trawlers.
Oh, you're so many in times of war. So many ships that have served in the Australian Navy are just ships that they commandeered and painted grey and sent on their way.
That's right. And the first surface ship sunk in the Royal Australian Navy was Garangi, which was sunk in Port Phillip Bay.
Yeah, wow.
And Canimbla, of course, is another one of the great...
Manura's sister.
Cruises. It is.
Well, it was at one point.
Number one.
But, yeah, no.
Well, 1 and 2, of course, because we had Canimbla 1 and Canimbla 2. And they did an enormous amount of work. Canimbla 1, Manora 1 and West Australia were part of the R Merchant Cruises. That's Chris Harvey. He's a descendant, but he's kept the association together. They've got over 400 members across Australia with all the veterans from those 3 ships plus HMAS Assault, where they all trained in Nelson Bay, New South Wales. There were 2,000, here it is, 2,000 Aussies and 20,000 Americans trained through that particular base.
And he's a very good case in point, because often veterans from that time period are no longer with us, but the associations that they formed have an ongoing life amongst their descendants, and they proudly carry the banner on Anzac Day and at various commemorations.
In fact, one of the survivors still around is Hiram Ristrom, who's in RSL Vasey East Bentley, and hopefully he'll be here on the 22nd of May for the Battle of Leyte Golf Service.
Now we're transitioning from Navy, from a nice blue to a little bit of green as the Army comes in.
And we saw the Australian Army Band Melbourne leading them there. They are based out at Watsonia on the base out there, and they draw mostly reserve members but also staff members from the Defence Force School of Music at Watsonia. And you'll hear them there playing Waltzing Matilda, of course. And I often muse on the fact that Waltzing Matilda has become very much a symbol of Australia. Where else in the world could we possibly have could we celebrate a song about a thief who suicides and say that this is such a wonderful thing? But it has become really much a part of Australian popular culture. And I remember serving overseas in South Korea, and some Colombians came up to me and said, can we have a recording of Waltzing Matilda, please? Because it's Australia. It symbolises Australia.
There is little more Australian than that. Just probably Vegemite and thongs.
Yes.
Yes.
I see they just had the British Occupational Force banner go through there before, where a lot of Australian servicemen, ships, Air Force, the whole lot, did some time there after the Second World War.
We've now moved on to the second AIF, so this is the Australian Imperial Forces that were raised for the Second World War, predominantly the 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th Divisions.
Yeah.
2nd 11 Field Regiment, our gunners. The Survey Regiment, so they do very important work, work that was needed to be done because we didn't have GPS back in those days, so they would work out where the guns were. Flash spotting and sound ranging, that would be used to detect the enemy's guns as well. Very difficult work, quite technical.
And still, I assume, necessary, just in case you were ever lost, you ever lost GPS access for some reason. If signals were jammed, you'd still have to be able to do things the old way. I was trained on navigating by the stars. I don't think they still do that anymore because we have so many redundancies. But yeah, keeping a connection to doing it the good old-fashioned way is
the old-fashioned way, indeed. So there are operations in Europe where there's significant issues with GPS these days.
So if we get into trouble, Nate, I'll be sticking with you.
Well, as the Army make their way down, Cyan is on the street, and she's talking with one of our many RSL representatives.
Hello, I'm here with Ben Webb, the Chief of Veteran Services for RSL Victoria. Ben, tell us, what does Anzac Day mean to you?
Look, it really is that time to commemorate. And when I say commemorate, it's about remembering not just those I've served with, but everyone who has served, and in particularly their families as well, who've served in their own way. So commemoration has quite a broad context where it is about remembering, reflecting on those who've served, also the experiences that they've had, which can be traumatic, and some of them do need some support following their service.
And in your role, is that something that you help with?
Absolutely. So that's I lead a team through RSL Victoria to support veterans and their families while they're serving and post-service as well.
And you were an athlete in the Invictus Games. Can you tell us about that and say how those sort of events help veterans to heal and move forward?
I think athlete's a bit of a stretch, but absolutely, yes. I was very fortunate to go to the first Invictus Games. And those events are amazing, but also it's a real paradigm shift in thinking, because even though you are injured and you have your conditions, you can become quite isolated despite that team with support around you. What events like Invictus Games do is really help to connect you with other veterans and recognise that, yeah, we're all going through similar things. What Invictus does really well is brings your partners along that journey as well, so you have that shared understanding, and that really helps for people to come together and move forward in their own journeys.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your service. All the best for the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Some very important words there. Of course, if you need assistance at any time, make sure you get in touch with Lifeline Australia, 13 11 14. Or on a day like today, reach out to your mates and have a chat. It's really, really important. The Invictus Games, that was an incredible experience. I hosted the opening and closing ceremonies. The ceremonies were just wonderful, just seeing people from around the world, because this is really a global thing that we're doing, isn't it? We can never operate as just Australians, as a solo unit, without thinking about everyone else.
It's spread so far and wide, but on a more local level, I have to also add to what Ben was just saying there with Cyan, and that is that, the RSL also provides something called RSL Active. Again, a very, on a small scale, but this idea backing this notion that, servicemen and women can come together in a safe space, in a space that they are understood, and participate in various social and athletic or sporting activities together, which is so important for mental health too.
I think one of the things we tend to miss also, Nate, is at a ground level, just being a member of the Returned and Services League starts that process where you're seeing your mates, and it doesn't have to be every day, but you see your mates. And one of the disappointing things is in Victoria, 75% of the veterans are not in the Returned and Services League to start with, when in fact that's sort of a level where you, with like-minded shipmates or army comrades or whatever, and that's where it starts, where you look at your mate and if there's something going on, you can say, hey, look, have you had a talk to Fred? And something like that, and we can just do it. But so many are not in the system to start with. Are you in the RSL, Nate?
I knew you were going to ask me that. No, I haven't joined an RSL
I'll have
yet.
a chat to you after.
We'll fix that. We'll fix that.
Yeah, just grab me some paperwork now while I'm a captive audience, and I'll get myself signed up. See, I haven't, because I've been lucky enough that I'm really well connected already with a lot of my mates from my time in service. Still regular catch-ups and hangouts, and not just to talk about the military, but just to be there for each other.
Yes.
And going back, Nate, actually talking about Invictus Games, one of the March leaders today, Francine Dudfield, actually participated in the Invictus Games as well, and has had a wonderful experience through that, doing that. She was actually a gold medalist in weightlifting.
Oh, wow.
All things, yes.
I love the games because they're, by necessity, accessible. Because, some of our injured personnel don't have full ability and movement. So there are some really incredible takes on sports, like the rowing, which is all done on rowing machines rather than on the water, and with handles adjusted so that people can row, whether they have one limb or two or whatever their disability may be. It's really incredible to watch people racing on rowing machines, I can tell you that.
Yes. PLC Band, another great school band that helps out every year for Anzac Day.
Oh yeah, PLC. Now, talk about helping out. Cyan's on the street and she's found someone else who's here attending the parade.
Just to pay respects. My uncle also fought in Newey, so here for that as well, to pay respect to him and, to everybody that fought for us, for our country.
What does it mean to you to be here today?
It means a lot. Yeah, it does. It's all about respecting, and I've come for many, many years. And I always came with my children as well. Yeah.
And when they're marching past, how does that make you feel?
Proud. Extremely proud. Yeah.
That is so lovely. So it hasn't always been the case, has it, that our service people have been able to walk down the street and people around them say, I'm proud of you?
No, and I think I can recall when I had short back and sides and everyone else had a fulsome hairdo.
Like what I'm trying to sport now?
Yeah. Which is, and you stood out a bit, and like through the Vietnam period it was pretty sad because there was this small group, and I think sadly we see a little bit of that happening today, but there is a larger cohort of people who just maintain respect and the integrity that goes with being in such a wonderful country as Australia. And I think that lady just basically emphasised that point.
She said it perfectly, that she's here just to support our veterans, and that makes her feel proud. That's what I feel, pride.
Yes.
Absolutely. It is a day to be proud of the service that we've done, the service, working with our mates. It is a great day. But as you said, particularly after the Vietnam War, those guys had it pretty tough when they came back.
Yeah, and it's worth remembering that not everybody has been celebrated like we're seeing today, and for some of those people, they maybe find a day like this particularly difficult. But it is wonderful that we can safely walk down the street and you can hear the applause in the background. Really say thank you to the men and women who have served our country in so many different ways. Aileen, how do you keep all of this straight in your head? I mean,
I don't.
The history of our military engagements across the world, even just the ones in peacetime at home, it's a very intricate web.
It really is, and I have to say, I mean, going back now, we're really trying to still capture the very last remaining stories that are from survivors of World War II. Obviously, that's a group that is shrinking rapidly, and it is just so important. And the so-called forgotten war, the Korean War, trying to capture all those stories and make sense of it and put it in writing and bring them to life. And so that we can have this legacy to keep moving forward and learn from our past and educate future generations.
It is hard because when you're serving, and gentlemen, tell me if I'm wrong, when you're doing the job, you often just consider it to be the job. You don't necessarily think that what you're doing is going to have any historical significance.
I think that's the point, mate. At the end of the day, and I'm just thinking about a lot of the commentary about the march, and for me, I'd probably prefer to march than be here, to be honest.
Well, off you go then. I'll get you out there in a tick, I promise.
My crowd's just gone. But it's more about, it's not so much who's watching, it's the fact that you're there, and it reflects. I think of when I first went to sea, I left recruit school, were put in a 40-seater bus, drove to Sydney, and I then marched on board HMAS Vendetta in 1966. Oh, wow. And to me, I was then put in a mess deck with over 50 people. And that's sort of what's in my mind when I'm marching. It's that sort of, just the team. Of course, in this reserve, there isn't one person's name in this reserve. It's all about the ship, about the battalion, the squadron. Mm-hmm. Even as we look up to the monument and you see the words inscribed on the side, which is on the east side of that shrine, it's said that that's what General Monash drafted, but it doesn't have his name.
Right.
It's because that he wasn't important in the sense of it's about how the ship, the battalion, went about their job, looked after their mates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's a ship, well, a unit, a battalion, they're a bigger thing, aren't they? They're a creature of their own, an entity in their own right. So, Aileen, how do you go about finding these stories? Because time is short.
Time is short,
and scramble. I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. So I rely very much on leads, I suppose one would call it, coming to me, tip-offs, I suppose, from members of the community who might know someone with a really interesting backstory, or our RSL sub-branches, for example. Or, for example, this year, as we've said earlier, focusing on peacekeepers. So that really has been me seeking out interesting stories about a peacekeepers and what their service has looked like and their experiences on the ground.
A lot of people, when they come home, I think, don't necessarily tell their story a lot, but Anzac Day can change that, can't it? Get somebody down to Young Jackson for a pot, and often the stories come flying out.
Yes, it's amazing how much we did.
Yeah, yeah.
And often, Nate, people do tell me that. They'll say to me in the process of me questioning them and interviewing them, wow, Aileen, I haven't thought about that since I served, or you've triggered some memories for me. And some people, it's very vivid. They can remember getting to the ground and overcome with the smell of burning tyres in peacekeeping situations. That hasn't left them.
I still very much recall stepping off the plane in the Middle East and just feeling the heat. Yeah, that's a very, very clear memory for me. That won't ever leave me.
I felt that when I got posted to Darwin.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course. Oh, Darwin. Much loved. I never got posted to Darwin at all, but being on a mine hunter for most of my career, one way or another, heading northwards every time we had to do that, it was a stop in at Cairns, stop in at Darwin,
yes,
and then on and up you go, up into into Southeast Asia. So Darwin, always the last port out and the first port home. Love it.
That's it.
And of course, something that I've come to realise that I didn't appreciate is, of course, all the equipment, the uniforms that you're carrying adds to that whole intense experience of the humidity and navigating where you need to go, and yeah.
When we rocked up, it was I was allowed 2 big duffel bags, army in vinyl. And I remember having one of those on my back and the sweat pooling there. It was horrible. Big trunk as well that we had. I think they'd been left on the tarmac for about 4 days before we got there. It was roasting hot. It was, it's burned into my brain, that memory.
And I'm sure things have changed over the years with modern technology and things becoming more lightweight.
I think they still take all the gear with them. It's when you have a job to do, where back in the old days they would say, no, we're not taking all that stuff, just take this A, B, C and D, and then we'll be back in 2 or 3 days. And that's where they've got the Diggers Workshop here in Vic Barracks, where they actually design how much do you need to take out on this particular run.
We've now moved on to the 7th Division, and we see the 2nd 14th and 2nd 16th battalions. They were 2 battalions that fought together at the Battle of Ishurava. They were the first of the 2nd AIF battalions that went to support the 39th and 53rd battalions that had been providing the defence as the Japanese had been moving down the Kokoda track. And that's where the Prime Minister spent his Anzac Day, at Ishurava.
Yeah, terrific.
Incredibly difficult combat in incredibly difficult conditions, dealing with the jungle, the heat, the mosquitoes, the dysentery, and the Japanese.
Yeah, I think Darwin's hard. They headed further north into Papua New Guinea.
Well, I think that was a milestone, wasn't it, in the Second World War, when we talked about the armed merchant cruisers. That was moving all the troops north after the success of Kokoda.
James, I'm going to ask you for some help here. Define for me a battalion.
So a battalion, it's they would have had, they marched up the Kokoda track with about 800 troops. So that's divided up into, there'd be companies of around 120. They would have support troops in there as well, a headquarters company. And the company made up of 3 or 4 platoons of about 30 soldiers each, and that would break down into a section. And the section is really your family. That'll be 10 troops, led by a corporal, and that's the main unit that you would that they would be the people that you would be the closest with. And it sort of all works back up from that. And above that, you've got your brigade and then a division on top of that.
So thinking about it, it's kind of, your brigade is your extended family.
Quite an extended family, yes. Yep.
That's brilliant. Red Shield Defence Service.
And it would be made up of lots of different types of people. So you would have your engineers, you would have a regiment of engineers, you'd have your logistics people with all of the capabilities that they bring to enable the brigade to function in the field. You may have some armour, and you would hopefully have some artillery with you as well. And then probably 2 or 3 infantry battalions there as well.
The Salvation Army Band here, talking about support. They've been looking after our service people for a long, long time. Ah, look at him. Big smile on his face as he gets to march.
He looks proud, doesn't he?
Very, very much.
And I think it's great seeing the kids marching alongside. It's sort of bringing those traditions down to the next generation. And it's also important to remember, you know, the sacrifice that people make when they're away serving, their families growing up. That's one of the tough parts of service.
That's it. Time without mum or dad because they're away serving Australia. It's tough for kids. My sister is in the Navy as well. She has 4 children, and I know it's always a tough time.
That is tough.
She has to leave. Yeah.
And equally the return, I think, home, it changes the dynamics all over again.
Oh, it does. She is very militant with them. I think Dad relaxes off a little bit, but rooms are very tidy when she's home.
We see one of the field ambulances there. They have a very tough job. So they would provide all of the services that you would sort of see in an emergency department, and yet they're doing it in places like Boona and Gona, which was an awful swampy beach, malaria-ridden. So they're looking after quite horrific casualties with very severe wounds, and they're doing it in extremely austere conditions.
Probably, yeah, with not enough of anything, right? And having to think and work on their feet.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're moving on to the 8th Division now. The 8th Division, it's great to see them because they had an extremely tough war. They deployed up to Malaya, fought a few battles in Malaya, withdrew to Singapore, and then were captured. The 2nd 14th Field Regiment, that was one of the few regiments that didn't go into the bag with the Japanese in Singapore. And you see their unit patch there, it's got the grey line down the bottom. That was to signify the separation of them from their brigade, from the division, and the intent was to go back to their normal unit patch once it was all reunited.
That's the thing, we have a lot of symbolism in the choices that we make as militaries in what we wear and our badges, and even the medals. I want to come back to medals for a second, because people may not understand that the ribbons, the coloured cloth that the medal hangs from, they're very carefully thought about, and they tell their own story, don't they, about what they're representing.
Indeed, they do, yeah.
But which was the principal service involved in that particular conflict, whether it be Army, Navy, Air Force.
It's great to see Gulf Force there. So that's 2nd 21st Division, deployed to Ambon. They had a very difficult job. They were deployed there, and Ambon was invaded, vastly numerically outnumbered by the Japanese. They were one of the bird forces. Gull, sparrow, lark, and I can't remember the last one.
Oh.
Of course, that's where Armidale was lost, and Teddy Sheehan got his VC in that vicinity.
Oh, okay, yep.
Trying to evacuate the soldiers.
Some people may not know the story of Teddy Sheehan.
Well, it was an amazing, and no doubt there were many of these things occurred across the war, but you know, when they were bombed by the Japanese and told to abandon ship, Teddy Sheehan went across with one of his shipmates, released a raft, and his shipmate jumped into the water. He then went back to his Oligan gun, where he was a loader, but he strapped himself to that gun because he could see the Japanese fighters strafing his mates in the water. And he decided, I'm going to do something about that. So he then fired upon the Japanese aircraft as the ship was sinking, and ultimately went down with the ship. And one of the things was Dr. Ray Leonard, who was probably the last surviving member of the Armidale, and a participant in the Corvette HMAS Armidale service here for many decades. And Ray used to tell the story about the survivors that were in the boats and on the raft, how they had to keep going because they were reminding themselves of what their shipmate did. They saw Teddy do that, and as far as they were concerned, they had to persist and keep going, and some of them were there for 9 days on the sea, never knowing whether they were going to be rescued. And then finally a warship came over the horizon. They wouldn't have known whether it was friend or foe, but they were finally rescued and survived.
Well, thanks to the ultimate sacrifice of Edward Teddy Sheehan, who is, of course, a Victoria Cross recipient as a result of that just heroic action.
And we've got probably Dr. Brendan Nelson to thank for his work in researching that just a few years ago to finally recognise the effort that Teddy made, the heroic effort he made for that to be recognised.
8th Div Australian Army Service Corps, they would have been the logistics unit supporting the entire division. Many of their members were taken prisoner and spent time in at Changi, and also working on the Thai-Burma Railway.
And that would have been a horrendous experience, though. When you think of the Thai Railway, all the HMAS Perth survivors that finished up there, along with...
My granddad was one of them.
Was he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very fortunate to survive.
It was very tough, though. He was he spoke glowingly of his time on the Perth. We spoke often about the night that it was sunk. He said nice things about the Japanese who picked them up. They were very courteous. He never spoke about his time in the POW camp. Very tough. So we then see the 9th Division now, and we talk about the symbolism. So they have a T insignia for their unit hat badge, and that was it's an unofficial battle honour. The T represents Tobruk, because they were the division predominantly during the siege of Tobruk. They were the rats of Tobruk.
The rats themselves.
That's it.
And they were very fortunate. And as we mentioned before, the Scrap Iron Flotilla provided considerable logistic support, getting reinforcements in, and stores, ammunition and food, and taking out the injured, and did that for months.
Indeed, yes.
A friend of mine who his grandfather was a rat of Tobruk. I think he's a lieutenant colonel now in the Australian Army, and there was some digging going on over there recently, and they pulled up a mess tin, one of those rectangular mess tins, and it had all been engraved with all the places that this soldier had been, and they managed to track down the descendant, who happened to be my mate, and he was given back his grandfather's mess tin from Tobruk.
Wow. That's incredible. That it would find its way home.
Yes.
2nd 8th Field Regiment, they were one of the regiments that fought at 2nd El Alamein, which was one of the large battles that Australia took part in. For the artillery there, in 13 days, they shot off 1.5 million rounds of ammunition.
Wow.
Not a bad effort.
And 9th Division at one point had 13 regiments of guns in support, which was the largest collection of guns that it was commanded by an Australian. And after the Deutsche Afrika Corps started their retreat, and they didn't stop until they got to North Africa.
Amazing.
2nd 43rd, so they landed at Lae, which was a divisional landing as a part of... They worked closely with 7th Division in a hammer and anvil attack. So they landed by sea. 7th Division came in, they marched in, and we had some paratroops come take the airfield at Nadzab.
You've got me speechless. I don't understand how you have all of this in your head. Okay, let's try it again. 2nd 23rd.
Yes.
Tell us about them.
So Finschhafen. So after Lae, the landing at the attack of Lae went so well that they decided that they would punch up the beach about 50 miles and land at Finschhafen. And so a brigade was sent up there and to land at Scarlet Beach. It's a beautiful beach. I've been there myself. And it was interesting because we were supported by the Americans. There were some significant command and control issues. And the Japanese actually tried to land where we had landed. So they actually conducted a counter landing. We've got the 2nd 24th here. So they fought at Tel El Isa, and this is a really interesting battle because they captured Unit 621, which was Rommel's signals intelligence unit. It was nicknamed the Circus because it had all sorts of different vehicles in it. The 2nd 24th, and one of the big questions is whether they knew what they were trying to find there, or whether it was just lucky. But this Unit 621, a little bit too far forward, was captured, and that effectively blinded Rommel. So he was actually getting, there was a spy. They found 2 copies of the French copy of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, and there was no one in the unit who spoke French.
Yeah.
And so they thought that was a little bit suspicious, and it was actually, they were using it as a one-time pad to communicate with a spy in Cairo who had broken into the US Embassy and collected their code book. And they were reading everything from the the American liaison. So Rommel was getting divisional orders before the divisional commanders were getting them. Losing Unit 621, he lost that, and it was just at that point that Montgomery started getting Enigma decrypts. So he started reading Rommel's mail, and this fundamentally changed the information domain and enabled Montgomery to go on and plan what became 2nd El Alamein.
I had no idea what I was getting into when I asked you. That's incredible. Wow, you wouldn't get a script past anyone if you wrote that down, would you? They wouldn't believe you. It's too tall a tale.
It is an amazing story.
There are so many stories like this from all of our conflicts that we've been involved in. Because the one thing I think that probably marks all of them is that Australians, when we are there and we have to help, we help as much and as widely as possible, which often means we have to do a heck of a lot of work with not enough stuff, and take sometimes the tricky way to figure out a problem and find a solution.
Flexibility, resourcefulness. Look, I think the interesting thing about the thing that I always reflect on with Anzac Day is that each one of these banners, there will be a huge number of stories.
Yeah, yeah.
An incredible... You're looking, like for a battalion, you're looking at just under 1,000 troops. All of those people will have their stories. And the Tel El Isa one, that's one that we know, but they'll all have their stories.
Well, it's a bit like before we saw the Wangaratta Zone written across the top, which is a reflection on the First World War, where they actually collected their troops from a geographic location, as opposed to later on you just got posted in from anywhere. But, they were from Geelong, Bendigo, Wangaratta, and they maintained that heritage.
And, of course, those towns to this day recognise that and respect it. They each have their own war memorial of some sort and are holding their own Anzac Day services this morning. And in fact, that's happening not just in towns and at war memorials, but schools, at retirement homes, places across the country and internationally too.
As part of my day job, I look after publishing Air Force history, and we get people approach us and say they would like to write about something or other, and we take it through a process and decide what we'll publish. And we have a policy that we won't publish autobiographies, and our reason is that of the 50,000 who could probably write us a story, we'd probably have 50,000 stories to tell, and we'd have to publish 50,000 books. So every single individual service is remarkable, and we can't cover them all. But I think if you were to speak to any veteran at any stage and say, tell me about your time, you could probably get a book out of it.
Yeah, roughly. At least one, maybe a couple of volumes.
That's true.
The other thing that holds all of us Australians together as well, you can see the koala there, a good bit of Australian larrikinism, a bit of cheekiness. It creeps in even to our military, right?
Well, that cuts out half the stories, no?
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's important to have a little bit of a sense of humour when you're, particularly in those adverse times when everyone's a little bit sleep deprived, a little bit hungry. It's important to have that sense of humour.
and also there are no Athenians in the trench.
Also, I can tell you that you didn't serve in the Navy there, James. Hungary? What?
Oh, yeah, obviously.
Oh, mate, there was a day.
You were talking earlier, Nate, about navigating by the stars. We have a saying that the Navy navigates by the stars, the Army sleeps under the stars, and the Air Force chooses its hotels by the stars.
Yeah, and this is the real reason Navy's got to have their own air arm, because the Air Force don't go anywhere where there's not a nice hotel. No. In theory and in stories, but of course, jokes, all jokes.
I was going to say that's true, but I did live in a tent by the side of an airfield for 7 months in the desert, and that was not very comfortable.
As a squadron leader, sir, you can say whatever you like.
I did 2 years in the aircraft carrier Melbourne, and the menu changed every time CAG, the Carrier Air Group, came on board.
Of course.
It went up about 2 rungs.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course. Which goes back to that saying about Scran.
Exactly.
Nate was talking about Scran before, and you haven't unpacked that yet. Slop cooked by the Royal Australian Navy.
I think that's a bit of a backronym, really. Because Scran's a word that they use. I think Northern England is it's a common use is for food. By the way, I should actually translate it for you, shouldn't I? So yeah, Scran is your tucker, your meal. So that's used in the vernacular in places like Hull, actually, in Yorkshire.
Yeah. Of course, a Navy dessert is called duff.
Duff,
and
absolutely.
If you go back for a second round of duff, you're doing double duff.
Yeah.
Yes. Or you're going round the buoy.
Indeed, around the buoy. That's what you've got to do when you stuff up as well. Anytime you do something wrong, round the buoy, give it another crack.
Well, looking at some of the marches, they'd be going around the buoy a couple of times.
For sure.
That was one of the big things at Cerberus, where every month you had divisions, and if you didn't get it right as you were doing the eyes right, it was around the buoy.
You could be out there marching all day.
Yep, that's true. Oh, not the crowd I was with, Nate.
No, of course, same. I mean, yeah, always one and done, me.
Yeah.
Perfect first time every time.
And you can see a lot of the places that have been. Oh, they've been to Commemorate. That is a beautiful little village up the Francisco River. Quite a lot of malaria around there. But it's important to remember these battles weren't fought in isolation. So there were villages, there were people who were living there. And of course we drew incredibly heavily on the New Guinea population to provide support, because a lot of the time the logistics had to be carried.
Yeah.
So for all of the food, all of the ammunition, there was a huge train of people who would be carrying those logistics.
And imagine going from Egypt, Libya to Borneo, New Guinea, just the difference is phenomenal. The terrain that they had to operate in.
And in fact, I think at Commemorate, the little primary school there, which probably has got about 6 kids, is called the George Wharf Primary School. And who is one of the battalion commanders who was fighting at Commemorate. And so that they remember that to this day.
Yeah.
And in fact, when we went there, one of their big pride and joys was they wheeled out this photo, a large photo which had been framed and had been sent to them by Brendan Nelson of George Wharf. So that history, that legacy, it goes a long way. And it was only a couple of years ago that happened. So really important to them still.
I wonder if people understand how, for many places overseas, they do have a strong connection. I mean, Villers-Bretonneux, I know many Australians have heard of it, but if you ever drive down the street there, you see Aussie flags. They're out and about because they're still so thankful for what our troops did in assisting them. It's really incredible how our service people can touch the lives of people overseas, and that's then held for so long.
I think they're just so thankful that they survived, and essentially it was because of those Allied forces coming through and just providing freedom that they currently enjoy.
So 4th Field Ambulance there, so they fought at Milne Bay, and
A World War II vet?
Yeah, possibly, yes.
Well, he is.
yes.
He's got the medals on the right side.
Indeed. Yep, that's fantastic, isn't it?
Yep.
So he's still going relatively strong. Melbourne Bay, we don't really know a lot of it. It's one of those battles that sort of has fallen off the radar. But it's a really important battle because that was the first time that the Japanese were stopped. So a force went down to Melbourne Bay, they dug in, they hadn't been there for that long, and the Japanese landed a couple of battalions of troops there, and tanks as well. And after some very, very tough fighting, which was happening almost at the same time of the Battle of Ishirava, they were forced to withdraw. Number 75 and I want to say 76 Squadron gave sterling service at Melbourne Bay. They should have almost got the Infantry Combat Medal because they were literally taking up wheels off and then they were into it, strafing the Japanese there. And that was the decisive factor, was the outstanding support that the RAAF was able to give the troops at Melbourne Bay.
Absolutely right, and the RAAF is proud in its commemoration of the Battle of Melbourne Bay, and it was one time where air power really came to the fore out of the three services, and that combined effort, it was the dominance of Australian air power.
Can you tell us?
Made a difference.
Can you tell us about Melbourne Bay? What happened there?
So the Japanese landed, and this was in response as they were continuing to move down. Really, they were still keen. It was after the Battle of the Coral Sea. They were still keen on getting into Port Moresby.
Right.
Because the Battle of the Coral Sea was probably where the first time, because the ships didn't come in contact with each other, it was all air power. And that was the first time the Japs had actually been stopped.
And that broke the myth of invincibility, because that would have been in August. So Pearl Harbor had only been the December before. So in 8 months, they'd gotten all the way from Japan down to Melbourne Bay and within sight of Port Moresby.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the Battle of the Coral Sea was in May 4th and 5th.
Yes.
So that was where that was the first time they'd been stopped, and then the land exercise, that was then the most important part after that.
Yeah.
Dark times for the nation.
42 was horrific for the Royal Australian Navy. They lost Canberra, Perth, so many surface warships. Dreadful time. And sometimes we forget, just, at sea, every day, similarly to the front line, where you've got enemy aircraft, submarines, other surface ships every day. And we tend to forget how tedious the whole thing was for everybody concerned.
I found a photo recently of the convoy that shipped the 39th and 53rd Battalion to Port Moresby, which I think they were in the Mauritania, and one of the escorts was the Perth.
Oh, yes.
So it's a great photo of the convoy all in formation. It was 6 weeks before Perth was sunk.
Yes, yeah. That was, the commanding officer was Heck Waller.
Yes.
He was actually D10 in the Mediterranean with the Scrapline Flotilla. He was commanding officer of Stewart, got promoted captain, stayed there for till the end of 41, and then moved across to Perth, and sadly was lost with Perth. And Perth and Houston, they were sunk together. 1,007 officers and sailors died that night.
Just so many people.
Yes, on the 1st of March.
Some bagpipes.
Oh, this is the combined, is it?
No, I think this looks like Scotch College.
Wow, that's a big contingent.
Yeah, they put together a large band for sure. And just the bagpipes. That tells you that it's Anzac Day, doesn't it?
Beautiful.
They
Fantastic.
are a fine, well-trained band. I play pipes myself, so I've got some inkling. And to hear them that well in tune takes
3 bass drums.
Quite some effort.
That's it. I'm leaving. Steve, you are far too talented. You pipe as well.
Yes.
What else are you hiding?
You do know the definition of a gentleman, don't you? Is a man who can play the bagpipes but doesn't.
I did note there is not a set in here for me, but maybe I'll let you get out and jump on some bagpipes later on this morning. Oh.
No, they sounded like a fine band, and they are clearly well trained, and they were playing that most unusual march called, I think it's called a Scottish Soldier or something. It's a march that's in 3/4, so there are 3 beats. We only have 2 legs, so you normally march in 2/4 or 4/4 or 6/8 as time signatures go, but that's one in 3/4.
So every 2 steps you're out of time, sort of thing.
Well, yes, your left becomes your right.
Yeah,
And if you don't know what's going on, you just march. But in my head, I go, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
I'll be marching next year.
We just had a searchlight battery go by. So it's back in the days when they would actually use a big searchlight to try and illuminate where the enemy aircraft were coming in, and they would work closely with an ACAC battery, which was just before them, in attempting to shoot down enemy aircraft.
And here is the Royal Australian Navy band going around the buoy.
Going around the buoy, indeed.
Clearly they didn't get it right first time, so they're having to march once more, Terry.
Thank you, Stephen.
No, it's difficult to march twice. It's a long march. It's a long way to go. You have to play pretty well all the way because you're supporting people behind you. And you saw the Navy there with their drums in the front rank, which is not something most bands do. The drummers normally are down the back, but the Navy has a proud tradition of having a front rank full of drummers, and that's one they picked up from their Royal Marine heritage as a Navy band.
Never backwards about coming forwards, the Navy, and I think that was around the buoy in the way you do a good dessert.
Yes.
Going around the buoy twice because they were so good the first time.
It was great to hear them twice, I must say.
A band led by Brett Donovan. He's the chief in charge out the front.
And now we have the Air Force coming through with their banners and Bomber Command there, where tragically so many people died. The attrition rate of Bomber Command was the worst within all flying services, and a very large percentage of people never came home. To have achieved 12 missions, I think it was the point at which you were given a spell, and there were several who didn't make that many missions.
And the ex-chair of the Shrine of Remembrance was Peter Isaacson, Wing Commander Peter Isaacson.
Yes, that's right.
I think he did 50 missions. Was that before he
I think
came
it was
home?
50, yes. Remarkable man.
He got into trouble for flying his bomber under the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
He brought his Lancaster back to Australia for the war bond effort to raise money, and I asked him about it one day and said, how did you end up flying your Lancaster under the Harbour Bridge? He said, I was just flying around Sydney as you do, and I saw an obstacle before me, and I thought, gee, what do I do? Should I go over or should I go under? And he said, oh, a bit late now. I suppose I really must go under. So he flew under.
Yeah. That is a bold move. I've sailed under the Sydney Harbour Bridge many, many times. Being on a mine hunter, bases on the other side, there is no way I would pass a plane through there.
No. They couldn't work out if they who was going to court-martial him. That's why he got away with it.
Yes, because he worked for Sydney, for Melbourne, but he was flying in Sydney, and the Sydney people wanted to court-martial him, and the Melbourne people said, no, we'll court-martial him. And one of the last things I ever heard him say was, they still haven't resolved that issue.
That's the best way. So, but it may still come.
Posthumously, yes. I don't know if that's possible. I hope not, because I'm in trouble. So here we have several of the RAF squadrons, RAAF squadrons coming through, and you'll see many of them, you can tell by their numbers, you'll see 451, 452 and so on. Those ones in the 400 series, they're part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, which started in 1939 and early 1940, where we had forces from the Commonwealth, Australia, New Zealand, Rhodesia and Canada and some other places, and they provided effectively manpower for the Royal Air Force. And as part of that, Australia said, well, we want to keep our own identity. So apart from having a distinctive dark blue Air Force uniform that you can see those cadets wearing there carrying the Pathfinder banner, we also chose to have our own squadrons, and in the memorandum that set up the Empire Air Training Scheme, Article 15 of that memorandum said that Australia may have its own distinctive squadrons. So 450, 451 and right up into the 460s. They're all those what we call Article 15 squadrons, and they were generally commanded by an Australian, and as best possible they were fully staffed by Australians, but that throughout the war, as the squadrons were moved around from Europe and later into the Pacific, wasn't always possible.
That's incredible. Cyan is still on the ground for us, getting around about, and has been speaking. She's found the Victoria's Senior Naval Officer.
Hello again, here I am with Commodore Greg York. You're a naval officer and a former captain. Tell us a bit about that. What's that like?
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing. So I'm the Senior Naval Officer Victoria. Privileged to be in that position, and a number of years ago I was lucky enough to be selected to be the Commissioning Commanding Officer of HMAS Arunta. So to take a brand new ship out of the shipyard and take that from essentially a steel box and make it into a living, breathing, fighting ship was pretty amazing.
Amazing, I can imagine, and a lot of pressure.
Yeah, a lot of pressure, and trying to get 160 of the crew to all working together to produce the outcome that government expects and the people of Australia expect. It was a challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then being here today on Anzac Day and seeing people serving now, what does that mean to you?
Look, it's extraordinarily rewarding for me to be able to be here and at the shrine, one of the most amazing places in the country, to pay our respects to the courage and sacrifice of those that served before us. At the end of the day, our values and what people understand of our current Navy is that history, and those people that served during World War I and World War II in our ships did amazing jobs, and we're trying to do the same now.
Well, you did play an important part in that history, so thank you so much, and thank you for your time this morning, Commodore.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Thanks.
Good man.
Victoria's Senior Naval Officer there. And you just saw the flyby as well.
We just saw the fly past of 4 PC-21s from RAF Base at East Sale, and perfect timing as always, of course.
Bang on 11 o'clock.
They were right as the Air Force contingent was approaching the Eternal Flame. So, yeah, there they were overhead. And the fly past is a form of aerial salute by the Air Force, and you saw them there with their smoke on trailing behind as they went over. And very tight formation. Here we go, coming around.
Just so impressive.
Oh, they fly so close to each other. I had the fortune of getting up in one of the roulettes, actually, a little while ago, a couple of years ago now. And when they get into that formation, you feel like you could reach and touch the other plane. They are so close. Oh, and I can feel that as well as they come overhead here.
I don't want to brag, Nate, but I have flown those roulette aircraft as well.
Oh, fair dinkum.
Of course he has.
Aileen, if you need someone to take stories from, you're writing all this down,
I've
right?
got everything I need right here.
Good.
Well, the most impressive formation I ever took part in was a 27-ship formation over Perth, where when each course graduates, they get each aircraft, each graduate and their instructor up, and they form this 27-ship Thunderbird formation. And what people don't realise is that even though they're very close like that, they aren't all right behind each other. They're slightly below.
Yeah.
So by the time you have 27 aircraft in a
one
formation...
of the back's practically on the ground.
Well, yes, precisely. So the leader has to make sure that they are well clear of the back one's ground clearance to be able to fly that.
What does it feel like to be in there at the moment, at that time?
I have always described it as it being like an airborne Lamborghini. You pull back on the stick and that turboprop engine, the shaft just whines, and you just feel the G-forces going, and you feel your legs getting very, very heavy. You can't lift your feet off the rudder pedals. They feel so heavy. It's magnificent.
What an experience.
There are two types of people. There's people who love flying, and then everybody else. And I think essentially when you get to go do it, you fall in love, don't you?
You do. The first time you fly inverted, the first time you do a spin and end up upside down, that is just the most terrifying, but the most exhilarating feeling. And once you've done it once, you can't get enough.
Oh, I would have gone back in a second. I did have a pause before I went up with the roulettes the first time, because they asked me to put on some life support gear, including special pants that inflate so you don't fall unconscious. Yeah, because you don't want the blood to rush to your legs.
Fascinating.
So yeah, you plug into the aircraft and it pumps air in to squeeze your legs and make sure the blood doesn't all get down there.
Well, there you go. I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yep, that's called a G-suit.
There you go.
Commonly, and it squeezes your stomach as well.
Oh, it's very odd when you start to go upside down, your stomach, ends up in your throat, and then all of a sudden your pants are squeezing you too. The first time, very odd, but I would get it back up there with the roulettes any time.
I'd say that chap's been back classed a few times.
Yeah. He's been around the boy?
Around the boy several times. No, this drum corps band is here at Anzac Day every year, and wonderful to see that military tradition of drumming, because it was the first form of signalling, and it predates obviously electronic communication, and it predates even trumpets and bugles. Out on the battlefield, drum signals were the form of command and dissemination of command on the field.
And now behind our uniformed people, we've got some cadets there. Just cadets, with some scouts there. I love seeing scouts getting out and about and getting involved.
Yes, and they can do a wonderful support role by carrying banners for organisations.
Sometimes dropping things too, but that's okay.
Well, that happens, and I'm sure they'll know the correct knot to attach that once more.
For sure. I was also a scout. A Sea Scout. I had a real theme, right? Sea Scout, Sea Cadet. I was a Navy Cadet and then joined the Navy.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was in Scouts too. It gave me a really good grounding, I think.
Of course you were.
So many things.
No, dib, 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 dob, dob, dob. I'm there with you.
Well, cadets, of course, are the Defence Force's contribution to making youngsters good Aussies.
Yeah.
And they run wonderful programs too. The programs aren't specifically military based. There's a lot of citizenship involved as well, and just teaching them to get on in teams also.
Yep.
I was just going to say, probably a lot of life skills to set these kids up for their future.
Oh, I learned how to iron, that's for sure.
There you go. And someone once told me, I mean, he's in his probably 70s or 80s now, but still from his military precision, he makes his bed, to that exact detail every single day without fail.
I hope my wife's not listening to this.
That's it. I'm definitely from the kind of school of, I bounced in the opposite direction after my military service and just went, nah, don't want to do this anymore if I don't have to. Although, every time I do make the bed, it's always with a proper corner tucked in.
It's the corner tuck. Yeah. That's it.
That's it, the hospital corner that we all learnt.
I'm reminded of when my wife ironed my uniform shirt for the first time, and when I put it on, I had tram tracks down the front. No. I said, Pam, you won't have to iron those again, and she hasn't.
I have a similar
40 years later.
Similar story. My wife ironed my Air Force shirt the first time, and I said, that's not good enough, she said.
I wonder if...
Is that where that scar came from?
I wonder if your partners set this up. All right, so anybody listening, if you are a partner of a military person, iron the uniform badly once, and you'll never have to do it again.
That is so true. Looking at this band here, look at them. They are playing without music. When I say without music, they're without printed music. Yeah. You'll see a lot of the bands have a little lyre, they call it, that's attached to their instrument, and it has the sheet music on it that they read, whereas all of these are playing from memory. That's quite a skill.
Yes.
I live near one of the schools that participate in the march, and I can honestly say the practicing that goes on is just remarkable. They are so dedicated to the cause.
Oh gosh, you'd want them, you'd want that to be happening when they're closer towards Anzac Day and they're sounding really good, wouldn't you?
It's throughout the year.
I imagine, yeah.
It is throughout the year. It's years of dedication
It
to learn to
absolutely
be a
is.
very good musician.
I imagine every February, though, just as the kids go back to school, there are a couple of weeks where it's especially difficult to listen to them. The new students practicing, perhaps.
Yes, but we all start somewhere.
Of course, of course. I did try my hand at bugling for a little while. Not particularly good at it. So I decided, yeah, I could stick with drums. That was definitely a bit easier to make quiet.
Yes, and I'd say the bugle, there are only 5 notes. I mean, how far wrong can you go?
Well,
it's getting them in the right order, and it's getting them to sound so good. That's the hard part. A good bugler or trumpeter, it is seamless, and you hear a last post performed on Anzac Day by someone who really knows their craft, and it is deeply moving.
Oh, it gave me a real appreciation for the talent those buglers have. Just because you're right, I mean, that last post, it's incredible, and when it's played expertly, it becomes something even bigger.
We'll have to get you here to one of the commemorative services in the sanctuary, Nate, because when you hear the bugler in there, it's the hairs on the back of your neck.
Oh, the acoustics are magnificent.
Yeah.
So it looks like we are now back here with the First World War commemoration marching, and there we are. That is your classic First World War trio. They are not her medals, they're worn on her right hand side, so possibly her father's or her uncle's medals, but that is the World War I trio, if you like.
It took our family years to work out how my grandfather was in the Welsh Guards, because he was a South Australian, and it wasn't until a funeral when one of my auntie, had written some notes and they read it out, and it transpired he was in the Merchant Navy, and when the war broke out he happened to be in England and just joined the British Army.
Wow. Okay. That's something that you might find a little more difficult to do these days.
Yes.
It's true.
Here we see the 39th Battalion raised in Ballarat, and I think this is one of the things when you drive around the countryside, you'll see those little memorials, and it's amazing to see the number of people who served from the country and lost their lives in the First World War. There was a huge contribution.
We sometimes forget that 1 in 10 Victorians joined up for the First World War, and out of those that were sent overseas, 1 in 5 made the supreme sacrifice.
Oh, wow.
And my understanding is there's only one other country in the world where that level of sacrifice occurred, and that was New Zealand. They had a higher level of loss.
And as well as the war memorials around those small towns, you'll also see avenues of honour. And several towns have plantings, often of European trees, reflective of where the war was, but sometimes of natives as well. And several of those have been restored of late, and in the small town in central Victoria where I live, we're having a project to rejuvenate that avenue of honour, Anzac Avenue as it's known. But Ballarat, we were just talking about with the 39th, and their avenue of honour starts at the Memorial Arch in Ballarat, and it goes for kilometres and kilometres, and each tree represents one person, and you can drive for 20 minutes and still be driving through that avenue of honour out of Ballarat. That really just makes it real and makes it real in the landscape.
Yeah.
Yes, that's marvellous.
So incredibly difficult at the time, of course, for those communities, and so good to see how they're commemorating those that they've lost. Cyan is still out and about for us, and she's found herself another senior officer.
Hello, I'm here with Major General Jason Blaine, one of the most senior members of the ADF in Victoria. Jason, tell us, what does today mean to you?
Today's a special day for all those who serve and have served. A great day of reflection, remembering service and sacrifice. Those of us who have had comrades fall along the way, particularly reflecting about them. their families and what they gave to this nation in that service.
Who are you thinking about today?
Well, look, I was very privileged to lead a task force in Afghanistan in 2010, a bunch of great Australians, and during that tour we had 6 men killed in action, about 35 of them wounded in action. I think about them today and what they gave in the defence of democracy and looking at providing peace and security to others who did not have that, and what they gave to do that.
And everyone here is so grateful. I mean, there were 40,000 people at the dawn service this morning. What does that mean?
Fantastic. Watching 40,000 people as that sun is rising, as we are going through the ode and reflecting on service and sacrifice, just shows you the connection that our nation has with service and why it's so important to use these days to reflect upon that. But you can see the crowd here today as well. It means a lot to many people. Many people have family who have served or experienced that, and to have the younger generations continue that memory through wearing their granddad or great-granddad or grandma's medals, to come out and to watch comrades and friends and family march, it's fantastic.
And talking about service, you were on the streets yesterday rattling the tin. How important is that appeal?
That was great. I mean, I was down at Flinders Street. We were selling Anzac badges for the RSL Anzac appeal, a really important cause, getting money back to the RSL to look after the welfare of veterans and their families. But you meet so many great people and so many tourists who are coming up, hey, what's going on? What's this about? And when you talk to them, you see it resonating with them as well. Okay, so this is about looking after those who have served the nation and their families, and they're very, very giving. And yesterday was a great day of raising money for a very important cause that helps all veterans and families in need. Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing that. Thank you for your time. It's been a real privilege to speak with you this morning.
Thank you, Selene. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great words, General.
It doesn't matter what rank you are. Everybody recognises the importance of supporting our veterans, yes, and mucking in and lending a hand where you can.
Yep, fantastic.
So just one thing we saw there, we saw the 21st Battalion, 1st AIF. Great to see the cadets there supporting them, carrying the banner, particularly my daughter.
Oh,
congratulations.
That's lovely. What's your daughter's name?
Elizabeth.
Hello, Elizabeth. I'm sure she'll be watching this back later on.
I think she will, yes. So fantastic, and it's an amazing program, the cadets program. Really great leadership development. I can't believe the advantages that the cadets get as they're looking to, find a career, go to uni, all of those sort of things. They're so much better prepared if they've been in cadets.
Yes, yeah, agreed.
Both of our children have been in cadets. Will was a sergeant, and he's now in 2nd year ADFA.
He's moved on to a career in the Navy, or in the Army, rather.
Army, yes.
Army?
Yep.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, well.
We can't have everything, no. So I'm not sure what Lizzie's going to do. She's thinking about that. But just the leadership skills that she's got. She's a cadet under officer now. An amazing program.
Lizzie, take it from me. Navy.
Yes.
Join the Navy.
Yes. Go Navy. You'll see some of the cadets came through and they were wearing a red sash. Some were, some weren't. And the significance of that is worn by sergeants and warrant officers 2nd class in the infantry and some of the other corps. So that really is a sign that they have reached a position of trust and authority in the cadets. And that goes back to the Peninsular Wars, back to Napoleonic days with 3 ranks firing and the sergeants stood behind. And they, if a man fell in one of the front ranks who were firing and reloading and sort of rolling forward like that, he would put his white sash as it started around that soldier and pull them out to the back to aid them in help. Very quickly became red. So that red sash has become very much an infantry symbol, and there are small tassels on the side, and there are, someone will correct me, but I think it was 88 of them, and there's one for each regiment of foot of the British Army.
Yeah.
So that symbolism is there in almost everything.
Yeah, it is there and it is deep. In fact, the red, if you're ever looking at medals on somebody's chest and you see a stripe of red through the centre, that normally tells you that medal is marking something that has been active service it symbolises bloodshed of
Yes.
some sort of another.
That's right, yeah. The red line in the centre is for ones that were for active service or for warlike service at the time, yes.
Love a bit of symbolism in the military, don't we?
We sure do. And it was important because back in the days when very few people could read and write, the words didn't mean much. And in the fog of war and in the haze of the battlefield, to be able to recognise your flag was very important. That was where your headquarters was, and that's where you needed to go and save if it was under threat. And that's where you took your orders from. So very, very important, this visual symbolism, and it carries on today.
I missed all that in the engine room.
Where everything was just dark and grey.
No such thing as symbolism down there. No,
No,
it's just straight instructions, bits and grease.
We got them there and had to make sure we got them back home.
Yeah.
The engine room is a strange environment. I remember Jim Killen, who was a flight sergeant pilot during the Second World War and became Minister for Defence, and he was doing a tour of a ship as Minister for Defence, and he went down to the boiler room, and the chief stoker said to him, who in the hell are you? And he said, I'm the Minister for Defence. And the chief stoker said, well, I'm the Queen of England, now get out of my boiler room. Because he didn't recognise him.
You never mess with a chief stoker.
No, that's for sure.
We saw the veterans from the Boer War there as well, or descendants from the Boer War.
Yes.
And it's great to see them being remembered as well, because, and I think, you know, the tradition of volunteering to serve the nation goes back to before we were a nation, because that was before Federation. So it was the independent colonies sending their troops off to serve with Mother England.
This is one of those 3-4 marches as well. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Right, left, right, left.
Pretty relaxed, Steve.
Actually, speaking of the Boer War and our contributions overseas, Commonwealth veterans are following here.
Yes, and these days we still serve with the Commonwealth as well as our partners in the United States. And the Commonwealth connection with us, certainly during the Second World War, and I speak from Air Force's point of view with the Empire Air Training Scheme, where we had pilots from all over the Commonwealth, but also, let's say, in the Battle of Britain, the number of Polish pilots who flew with the Royal Air Force is remarkable. They, having fled Poland as fighter pilots and had gone to the UK, and they were a resource not to be wasted, and they performed gallantly during the Battle of Britain.
Dunkirk veterans there, now the Scottish Ex-Service Association.
And they're Highland dancers with their velvet vests on, and each of them with their plaid socks to match their kilts. And I won't tell you, Nate, in my tailoring days, I used to make those velvet jackets for dancers.
Oh, brilliant.
And it's really quite a skill, because they have to fit them very close, and they have to be, the seams mustn't show. So there's a real trick to making them inside out and then turning them right way out again before you put the buttons and braid on. And there's, again, a lot of tradition that goes into their outfits.
All right, Steve, I need a sewing lesson. So let's find Sian on the street. She's speaking with a member of the public.
Hello again. I'm here now with Bruna Norrish from the Women's Veterans Network Australia. Bruna, tell us, what is the network and how long has it been in Victoria?
The network started in 2013 predominantly in Townsville, and it's slowly grown across Australia. I think about 18 months, 2 years ago it started in Melbourne, so we're building our organisation here, and this is the first year we've been able to march under the Australian Veterans Network Australia banner in Melbourne, so it's really exciting to be part of that organisation.
What did it mean to you to march under that banner?
Under the banner was awesome. I've met some new people today that are in, obviously, because it involves all services, so not only Army, Air Force and Navy. So I've met some new friends here, because once you join the military, I think you all become family. But ironically, I've always also marched with a friend of mine who I enlisted with in 1988, and her and I went through Kapuka together as very young soldiers. So we marched together. So it's reconnecting those friendships and those foundations that you build in the military and making new connections. So it's really, really important.
So in 1988, you served for 17 years. What does Anzac Day in general mean to you?
I think it's a really important day. It gives us an opportunity to stop and reflect of the current people who are still serving, and certainly the people who served before us, who gave us the freedoms and the sacrifices they made so that we have this wonderful country that we can enjoy and continue to enjoy. So it is really, really important that we keep up this tradition and that we educate the youth and the generation behind us that continue this tradition, because it's really, really important. They understand the sacrifices people made for us to be able to enjoy our freedom.
Thank you for the sacrifices you made, and thank you so much for your time this morning.
It's my pleasure.
Brenda there, representing the Women's Veterans Network of Australia. Eileen, seeing more and more women in the Anzac Day parade every year it's really heartening, isn't it?
It absolutely is heartening, and I have to say, I mean, even the recognition by way of, for example, the Anzac Appeal badge, for example, featuring Vivian Bullwinkle, you know, who was that terrific nurse, and telling those stories and putting women in the spotlight about their experiences. And a lot of them, you know, say that from where it was all those years ago to where it is now has come such a long way.
Incredibly, incredibly far. Because of course, it's not just the people in, you know, those in the world wars that were up front holding a gun. It was the people that were pulling them back out and patching them together and supporting those forces, not just overseas, but at home as well.
Exactly, and again, in my role telling these stories, I've met so many interesting women who've brought so much to various services, from signals to just a whole range. Like the skill set is so vast and the contribution is huge.
Yeah, yeah. And now, of course, there's women serving openly and across our defence forces, which means that there are more and more veterans who are women who march and are represented here at Anzac Day every year.
Definitely, and we want to tell the stories.
Did your family have some military history?
So my father served. He was conscripted with the South African Army, actually. So which we just saw.
Perfect timing.
That was good timing. We just saw the South African veterans walk past there in the march. So he was conscripted, and again, I mean, not something necessarily that he would have volunteered himself to do, but certainly when he was in, he tells me that he was immensely proud, and to this day can remember his number and all the roles that he did, and he's got some great stories to tell.
Mm-hmm. Service number, that's another thing that's burned into my brain. I am never going to forget that, ever. I think that'll be the last thing to go if my memory ever fails me, for sure. There are so few people, aren't there, that don't have some sort of military connection.
That's right, and again, it's just opened up a whole world to me, just to see how many people come out and attend, even if the day isn't necessarily personal to you, but you want to show your respect and your thanks.
It really has become part of Australian, it has always been part of Australian culture. And we were talking earlier about it having a bit of a lull, particularly during and after the Vietnam period.
Yeah.
And I remember the nation, right from the top, deciding that something needed to be done about it. And there was a campaign called Australia Remembers that was done in the early 80s. And having done Anzac Day for 40 plus years, I had seen Anzac Day evolve to the point where it was quite low. And dawn service might have had 12 people here at the shrine.
Wow.
And
that few.
Well, I'm exaggerating probably, but maybe 100.
Yeah.
You know, the crowd was only 2 deep. And I remember the very day it changed was after that campaign, marching down St Kilda Road to the shrine and out the front of the unit I was leading, and people were putting up signs saying thank you.
Yeah,
and that had never happened before. A4 printed off piece of paper, hand scribbled piece of paper saying thank you. And something clicked in the Australian psyche at that time, a bit of a reboot, if you like, after the way the Vietnam veterans had been treated. And it was as clear as day, that change. And from that year onwards, dawn services here have been in their thousands and thousands.
Yeah, from a couple hundred to 40,000 this morning. It's incredible. And speaking of Vietnam, here is the Republic of Vietnam. These are our allies marching now along the parade route.
And it's great to see them marching. I find it really interesting talking to some of these veterans because their emotional tie to Anzac Day is really tight because of the fact that we went over to help them in their time of need.
So I think they were established in 1980, if that's correct.
Oh, the Veterans Association?
Yes.
Yeah. And then Vive la France.
And it's great to see all of the allies marching today. And I think because it's really important in the Second World War, the First World War, it really is about those coalitions that of democracies coming together to ensure that our way of life is protected. And so the French, obviously they've got a significant tie to us from that First World War.
Two of the veterans marching with the French veterans today hold the highest French decorations, the Legion of Honor and the Military Medal. That's pretty impressive. It's not very often you get to actually lay eyes on those highest medals because they're so rarely handed out.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And some of them I know won't even talk about it. My great uncle was awarded the Croix de Guerre, which is sort of the French equivalent of the Victoria Cross, and he got that during World War II. And his family told me he has never spoken about it, and nobody knows why he was awarded it.
Yeah, wow.
And I was lucky in that I went around for dinner one night, and I think purely because we were both in the military, he confided in me how it was awarded for the first time. And that really, I guess, shows that connection that exists in the military, the bonds that military people have.
It's great seeing the Turkish marching
because
obviously we're here on this day representing the landing at Gallipoli, and yet time moves on and we can see that bond is really quite tight with the Turkish community. So it's fantastic to see them marching as well.
Oh, it is. And when you go to Gallipoli, the Turkish people are so warm and so friendly. And while they might not have enough English to have a great conversation, they usually say, German? You go, no. They go, American? No. And they go, oh, Australia. Ah, you are our friends. And they can say that in English, which I found quite moving on the several times I've been over.
I find the same thing in Vietnam as well. The people there are very welcoming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
It is, of course, going to be a really large commemoration service in Turkey later today. And the dawn service, of course, and at Lone Pine, the services are around the world for Anzac Day. Wherever you find Australians, you're likely to find some sort of Anzac Day service.
That's so true, and the Turkish do have a big ceremony up there, and The Australians start overnight on Anzac Cove, and then they wend their way up after the dawn service to Lone Pine, and they take part in the commemoration up there. Some go to Chunuk Bair for the New Zealand commemoration, and some go back further down the hill for the Turkish one. And the Turkish commemoration is absolutely magnificent. Their military puts on a fine show. The Iskras, their aerobatic display team, always puts on a three-dimensional flying display with smoke that, viewed from on high, is just a sight to behold. And I was lucky enough to go there 3 times with my work, and on the 3rd time I was jumping across a little culvert to go into Lone Pine, and the rain had washed away the soil, and I picked up a bullet that I spied. It's a 303 bullet. It has the rifling marks on it, so it had been fired by an Anzac. And I said to one of the guides, "What is this location here exactly?" He said, "Oh, that's the Turkish trenches where you found that." So I managed to pick up a bullet fired by an Anzac at the Turks.
That is incredible.
What a souvenir.
That's one of my my cherished souvenirs, yes.
Have you still got that in your possession?
Not today, but in my possession, yes.
Yes, okay.
I can see Aileen's eyeing off that. A bit of a look
we'll
at for that.
talk later.
Let's get to the car in one piece.
There was so much lead flying around that finding a bullet or a casing in that area, it's actually probably more common than you might think.
Well, yes, and in fact, we were there the day before, and we were sitting on the beach at Anzac Cove, and it's a pebbly sort of beach. It's not terribly sandy, and the water lapped up, and one of my troops felt something sort of lodge between his fingers, and he picked it up like that to pull it out, and it was a 303 shell.
That's incredible.
Still had the date stamped in the back of it of 1915.
That is just, it just tells you about how, you know, for those things to still be there and so readily findable today, it just tells you the volume, the absolute volume of the bullets that flew through the air.
Yes, it just would have been horrendous to be there. Absolutely horrendous.
Really paints a picture. But I'm sure, I have no doubt, just to be there would be such an experience.
Yeah, I've never had the opportunity to visit, unfortunately, but it's a place I think a lot of Australians make a pilgrimage at some point in their life to Anzac Cove, and I certainly will.
Yeah, on the to-do list.
Mm.
And here we have the Filipino veterans marching. It's great to see them out today. Of course, a close ally of ours now. And their World War II experience was quite horrific. And indeed, it was MacArthur's intention when he landed in Australia to organise the defence so that he could go back and reclaim the Philippines.
And there's a service on the 22nd of May where the Consulate and the Naval Commemoration Committee of Victoria are going to dedicate a plaque to the Battle of Leyte Gulf. And I think the Philippine ambassador is going to be there in the consulate. So it's 22nd at 11 o'clock, not too far from here in the reserve.
That's brilliant.
And there we have Australian Air Force cadets marching, and they do a fine job with them there in such close formation and perfect step. And they're preceded, of course, by the Army cadets.
Gee, their shoes are cleaner than yours, Steve.
They get in trouble if theirs aren't clean.
They look terrific.
They do look fabulous, yes.
It is really wonderful to see so many young people getting involved. I mean, for these kids, cadets is a social activity, really, isn't it? But one where you get to put on a uniform and you get a rank and you learn some life skills. I certainly learned how to tie plenty more knots other than the ones I'd learned when I was in the Scouts. Oh, there you go. Someone's got a little bit of a rock in their march.
Got a bit of a jive happening there. Yeah. Yes, yes.
Well, it takes you away from home, doesn't it? And you're with like-minded teenagers.
Yeah, and same with the Scouts and the Girl Guides who are following them up. But of course, you can be a little bit younger and be a Cub Scout or a Scout and a Girl Guide.
Yes.
I think the cadets generally got to be a little bit older and
14.
getting into your teens. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I remember my first Anzac Day as a cadet at Tiers Bow in Geelong.
Oh yeah.
Out there at it's 14 years of age.
T.S. Marmion for me in WA.
Oh.
Was never a girl guide though. Sadly.
Wishful
Oh, well.
thinking.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. My daughter's just, in the last 12 months, become a Queen's Guide, and to have got the signed paper from Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II is one of her cherished possessions. And she went right through guiding from Brownies very young and now going out into a professional career. So it really does help young people along.
That's wonderful. And of course, the cadets and the guides and the scouts have been helping out today, carrying signs and supporting our veterans and families as they marched up St Kilda Road and here to the Shrine of Remembrance. So if you happen to see them, if you happen to be out and about today and see somebody with their scarf on and their toggle, give them a wave. Say thanks, because they helped out today too.
Yes.
They've done an amazing job.
They really have.
Early start for all of them.
Yes, so true. The Army cadets started before the First World War, in fact, with the Universal Training Scheme, but the Air Force cadets started in World War II with the Air Training Corps, and so many of those really wanted to take part in the war effort and were really too young, but it gave them air-mindedness and it gave them some skills that were required during the war. So it really used it as a recruiting program. But these days I don't think cadets really aim for recruiting terribly much, but it's one of those side effects that inevitably happens, and quite a fair percentage of those, certainly in the AAFC, the Australian Air Force cadets, do go on to a career in the military.
And it's amazing when you're talking about cadets, the youngest person that died at Gallipoli was James Martin, and he was 14 years and 9 months old.
Wow. Did he lie about his age to go overseas?
Just a tad.
Yes, I think so. I've just been researching some who were too old and lied about their age to go overseas. And from my little town of Amphitheatre, there was one who was considerably older than the rest, and he went along and basically looked after the boys and made sure they didn't get into trouble. And so it happened at the other end as well, going over as a bit of a father figure.
Right.
Yeah, they were referred to as the 39 liars, because you needed to be 39 when you signed up.
Right.
And so there was a lot of people who weren't 39.
Okay.
Just got all the marshals now doing their finalising the march. Brian on the right hand side there, who did most of the work for today, along with Simon.
And I love that each is carrying a folder.
Yeah, of course.
That has the order of march in it, and they are enforcing that. That's wonderful.
Of course, the Chief Marshal's Colonel Jason Cook.
Yes.
He was in the VIP group. He'll be sitting in the tent watching.
Yeah, that bit of paper is today's version of the pace stick. You know, you'd see tucked under an arm.
Yeah. The sign of authority.
Yeah. Do not mess with me. I have a running order.
Yes.
What a wonderful monument.
Someone asked me about pace sticks the other day because I didn't know, and I was
you
able
didn't know,
to point
Steve?
out that I knew, but they didn't know, and I was able to point out that it's hinged at the top and it turns into a triangle, and you can set the length of pace, and there's a specific way to march with it, and there's no question that the number of paces between things is accurate because the sergeant major has used his or her pace stick to make it so.
Yeah. So we've gone there from the young ones to the marshals. Fittingly, Cyan has found a 100-year-old veteran.
Well, it means quite a lot. I represent a 451 squadron. The lads that are still over in the Middle East, and also the ones I represented here. I was secretary of the 451 squadron, and I used to march with them, and unfortunately I think I'm the only one left, so I like to represent them as well, yeah.
And who are you thinking about as you march today?
Well, mainly the lads who are over in Corsica, who were killed while we was there, yeah.
And you've gone back there, is that right? What was that like?
That's right, yes. In 2018, yes. And they were unbelievable, the people of Corsica who were surprised that I was one of them that supported their life over there, yeah.
I can imagine. And what does it mean to you to be marching with your children today?
Well, there's a few of them, but it's great. It is great, yes. I can recall watching my father, yeah, in the march as a kid, yeah, yeah.
And you turn 101 this June. What are you going to be doing to celebrate that?
Not much, really. Yeah, it's pretty quiet these years, yeah.
But obviously you've got a lot of people here loving and supporting you, and so many people at the march. What does it mean to you to see so many people, children and adults?
Oh, it's fantastic, really, yes. It's the thought that's behind the whole thing, I think, yeah.
And why is it so important that we do remember on Anzac Day?
Well, it's hard to say really, but I hope that, well, I doubt it will ever be any quietness. It always seems to crop up, but unfortunately these things happen, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for your service, Bert. We really appreciate it.
Good. I thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, it's great.
And wasn't he great? Bert Biggs there. He marched in the parade. 6 of his great-grandkids and his son Doug with him. Just so wonderful to hear a voice still that strong,
yes,
to this day.
It's fantastic to see.
Yeah, brilliant.
And here we have the massed pipes and drums forming up. They're forming up there at the top of the steps on the forecourt, and they're going to march past the saluting base and the eternal flame. And they will be taken from pipe bands who have been here today from all over Melbourne and Victoria. And there they are forming up. And you'll see the pipers at the front, the bass drums in a rank in the middle there, and then the snare drummers and tenor drummers there behind. And if you think one piper is impressive, this 100 or so that must be there is very, very impressive and makes such a sound.
We've, of course, now transitioned from the parade. The parade is finished, it's completed, and now to a commemoration service here at the Shrine of Remembrance this morning. What will the rest of the day look like from here? We've got a wreath laying.
Football?
Oh yeah, football. Down to the pub before too long for many of the people marching today, I'm sure.
Yes, Young and Jackson's is very close, but yes, there will be a commemorative service on now.
I think there'll be a bit of reminiscing, camaraderie amongst the troops.
There are many, many well-held and healed customs on Anzac Day, including, of course, the message from the Governor-General of Australia, His Excellency, the Honourable David Hurley.
On Anzac Day, we acknowledge those who have chosen to serve in our name and follow in the steps of our Anzac forebears. We acknowledge that they and their families disproportionately bear the cost of maintaining our freedoms and way of life. We honour them and give thanks. We remember and reflect. A beloved friend of Linda and mine passed away in 2008. Alec Hill was my military history lecturer at Duntroon. He was a veteran of the Second World War. A Radhacha Brook, Alec also fought at El Alamein and later in the Pacific. He knew combat and he knew Australian soldiers. I went to him for advice on many occasions. Before my first visit to Gallipoli, I asked Alec how I should approach the visit. His advice was quite simple. Go stand in the water at Anzac Cove and look up. I took Alec's advice, and as I looked up, I tried to put myself in the shoes of the Anzacs. Rising from the gloom were heights that appeared unscalable. No obvious tracks, numerous false crests, and an uncertain summit. How to go forward must have been the question on every mind. That morning's experience has returned to me many times during the past 5 years. I consider it a metaphor for the difficult experiences we have shared as a country. Drought, devastating bushfires, a pandemic, cyclones, and vast flooding. How to go forward has been the question asked by so many people and communities when they stared at the challenges ahead of them. What has brought me comfort and given me optimism for Australia has been their response. A response that I believe draws from the Anzac experience, the Anzac legacy, as we often call it. Give us a job to do, and we'll give it our best. While we're doing the job, we'll do it in a way that makes you proud. And while we're doing the job, we will look after our mates and continue to look after them when the job is done. It's a legacy that we aspire to embody. A legacy that we at times fail to meet. Yet it is a legacy that we remain determined to try to fulfil. It has helped define our national character. I know that members of the ADF hold to this legacy dearly. To not let the Anzacs down was a common motivator for my soldiers in my battalion when we deployed to Somalia. This being my last Anzac address as Governor-General and Commander-in-Chief, I want to assure our serving personnel that we respect their service. They should be proud of the uniform they wear. They are rightful inheritors and protectors of the Anzac legacy. We are proud of them. Today is special for another reason. It is the centenary of the first Anzac service conducted in Australia in the format we know today. Canon David Garland, an Anglican priest, had witnessed the Anzacs at war in Western Europe. He understood the legacy that they were creating and tried to capture it at that first service at Toowong Cemetery in Brisbane. Poignantly, that service ended with the familiar words, "Lest we forget." Lest we forget Canon Garland and his inspired vision for remembrance that honours the loved ones we have lost. Lest we forget our nation's modern roots and how they can help us as a country today. Lest we forget the sacrifice and pain of so many in uniform and at home in our country's history. Lest we forget.
The Governor-General there coming from the War Memorial in Canberra. Well, the pipers and the drummers are marching up and down the forecourt here, really showing off their skills. Was it 100 pipers you said we'd end up with?
That was my guess. There could well be more. But the important thing to note is look at the pace they're marching at. It's about 104 beats a minute. That's a real swagger pace. And when you do that, you can see the kilt swing as a result. You march too quickly and it upsets the way the kilt moves. So
right.
You can see them at the back there with the kilt swinging from side to side. And of course, the pattern on the back of the kilt for most of them is the same as the pattern on the front. You should be able to see the tartan complete in the pleats as you see it flat on the front, except for those. That's what we call military pleating, and that's a black watch tartan, or in fact a Campbell tartan, and they deliberately disrupt the pattern by picking the main feature out and making it stripy, if you like. So two different ways of making kilts.
The one thing you didn't know you were getting this morning, Victoria, was a lesson in kilts. But I tell you what, I am very glad I'm getting one.
Did I tell you I'm a kilt maker?
Yeah, well,
twice. How else would you know this sort of my new shoe.
I could have gone my whole life without knowing this.
No, I'm here for it, absolutely.
And you see that sword that drum major is wearing? That's a box hilt sword that is worn by Scottish regiments, and it differs vastly from the infantry and cavalry and artillery pattern swords. And you'll see it has that basket hilt lined with red velvet there.
I'm just frantically trying to count the number of pipers.
I thought there was about 150.
Oh, quite possibly. I think, yes.
Like 10 abreast. And
yes.
Wheeling around now.
Very difficult to wheel and keep your formation when you are so far across the front, but they're doing particularly well there.
Well, what are they, 8 abreast there or something? Is it? Or more even?
Yeah, I thought it was more.
Yeah,
they
10.
look fantastic, though, and they sound great.
15. Oh, wow, I don't know. I've lost count. But yeah, that's very difficult because the person on the inside has to barely move, while the person on the outside of the wheel has to really pace out, step out and get going, because otherwise you don't stay in line.
That's exactly right.
in fact, I think there's more drummers abreast than there are pipers. About 11, I think.
Right.
Anyway, there's a lot.
Anyway, they are making a magnificent sound here and putting on a fabulous show today at Melbourne's Shrine of Remembrance as they leave the forecourt and they have marched past the Eternal Flame and they are going between the three massive flagpoles here as they go out into the reserve and ready to fall out.
And actually walking right past us here in the commentary box that you can just see on the right of your screen there. Sure, if Steve gave a wave, you could probably see him in the window there. But I can feel. There you go.
There we go.
But I can feel the vibrations from the drummers coming through the floor here. That feeling of just excitement that comes from a proper marching band with pipes. Oh, I love it. There's not much that says military like that, is there?
So true.
We've seen quite a few marching bands today, and they've all been fantastic.
They have all been incredible. Whether they've been marching at 104 paces, 120, 372, I don't know. Was that not quite right?
No.
No,
you can do double time. That's 140, but that's you wouldn't do that with a band.
No. And then they go just falling out now.
Did I tell you I was in the Newtown and Jewel pipe band? Oh, sorry.
Good. We'll talk later.
As a teenager.
Yes, I'll audition you soon. Terry.
That's brilliant. You can see the crowds gathered here at the Shrine of Remembrance now. The quite well-attended parade along the parade road. Of course, we were only showing you near here at the Shrine of Remembrance. But from here, people will take a moment to remember and perhaps regard the Eternal Flame for a moment and have a think about the reasons they've come out on Anzac Day before then going back. And for many, it'll be back to their lives, but for many more, and certainly hazard a guess and say the majority of the veterans, it'll be time to now go and catch up with mates. Is that the best bit of the day, do you reckon?
I think so. Well, maybe not the best part, but an important
part, definitely. I think that from dawn service and the gunfire breakfast afterwards to then the parade, this is a day certainly of significance, but you're right. I think the most important part at the end of the day is to make sure that you spend some time with your mates and those who served where you can, and telling your stories of your service, whether in uniform or out.
Yes, that's right. And retiring to the pub was a tradition. People might in fact go for a coffee these days, or maybe just go for a bite to eat. And I remember marching in Sydney, and I was very young, and I was in the army at that stage, and they wanted somebody to join the Navy band for a day. So they put me in a Navy uniform, and afterwards I ended up in a pub, and there I was in a Navy uniform, only having served in the army, and I had people say, "Oh, good on you, thanks for you," and buying me beers, and they're asking what it's like on ship. So I couldn't fess up that I wasn't in the Navy.
I can't believe this, Steve. You're making this up as you go along.
I am not. I have served 1 day in the Navy, 4 years in the Army, and I don't know, 45 years in the Air Force or something.
Goodness me.
This Anzac Day in particular, we honour the men and women of the peacekeeping and peacemaking forces. They don't always get the recognition they deserve, as mentioned at today's dawn service. Perhaps it's because the word peace tends to soften the reality.
Looking there at the flags at half-mast here at the Shrine of Remembrance. It has been a really significant day. Throughout the day, from the 40,000 that gathered here this morning for the dawn service, the parade winding its way along St Kilda Road and here to the shrine. We've seen people young and old gathering to commemorate Anzac Day. And that's happening not just here in Melbourne, but around Australia. And for the rest of the day, there'll be time and space for people to think and thank our veterans, think about their service, those that have served, and just take a moment. Well, thank you for watching this 2024 broadcast of the Melbourne Anzac Day March. That's the end of the coverage for us, but if you missed any of this or the dawn service this morning, you can see those on our website and streaming platforms, and will also be available later today on ABC iView. And later at 12:30 Eastern Time, you can watch live coverage of the Gallipoli dawn service from Turkey, followed by the commemorative service from Villers-Bretonneux in France. And many thanks to our expert commentators, Aileen, James, Steve and Terry, along with the rest of the ABC team here. I'm Nate Byrne. I look really forward to joining you next year for another Anzac Day March service.